Good evening, and welcome to the regularly scheduled Clawson City Council meeting of December 4th. Please rise for this meeting is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation done by Pastor Steve Traxel of Grace Apostolic Church. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Lord, we're so thankful today, first and foremost, for this day that you've given to us. We'll be sure to give you the praise and glory for all things that you've given to us. Lord, this is the day that you've made. We'll rejoice and be glad in it. Lord, we're so thankful for the blessings upon this wonderful city. There's no city like Clawson. We know it's because your divine hand's upon us. I'm asking, Lord, today for divine wisdom and direction for our council members, those that lead this city. Lord, I pray that you'd help them make the right decisions and choices for the families, for the husbands and wives and children that live in this place. We thank you for this city. Thank you for this day. We give you the praise and glory for all things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Roll call, please.
Mayor Woolley. Here. Councilmember Aris.
Yes, here.
Councilmember Milan.
Here.
Councilmember Moffitt.
Present.
Councilmember Albert.
Here.
The first item on the agenda is consideration of approving the following consent agenda. The minutes of the special city council meeting held on Tuesday, November 20th, and minutes of the regular city council meeting held on Tuesday, November 20th. They're both on here.
Mayor, I move the consent agenda be approved as listed.
Support. Any questions or discussions? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Aris.
Yes.
Councilmember Milan.
Yes.
Councilmember Moffitt.
Yes.
Councilmember Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Woolley.
Yes. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consideration of a resolution recognizing the Ryan Rocks Outdoor Adventures, Inc. as a nonprofit organization operating in the community for the purpose of obtaining charitable gaming licenses. Mr. Bob Miller is requesting on behalf of Ryan Rocks Outdoor Adventures that the City Council recognize Ryan Rocks Outdoor Adventure as a local nonprofit organization. In order to obtain a charitable gaming license, the Ryan Rocks Outdoor Adventure, Inc. must have a resolution passed by the local governing body. I recommend that the resolution be adopted. I looked at their site, and they do great things, and they focus on doing things for children with cancer and create memories that will last a lifetime.
Is the gaming license because they do raffles, or why is it the gaming? I saw they have a 503C.
501c3.
Five of that one. But why the gaming license? That's what I didn't
I
understand.
think we have to have a motion to continue the discussion.
Madam Mayor, I move the resolution recognizing Ryan Rocks Outdoor Adventures, Inc. as as a local nonprofit organization in the community for the purpose of obtaining charitable gaming licenses be approved. Support.
So why do they need the gaming license? Do we know?
I'm guessing that they probably need it for, raffles and
that
other
sort of
things
thing?
like that to help with their fundraising. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
I thought you
Please
might
come
be.
to the microphone. I wasn't sure. Please do. Thank you.
It is because we are moving forward with our programming, and yes, we will be needing raffle licenses, is what this is for.
I looked at your website, and as Mayor Woolley said, you guys do really nice stuff, really great organization. I just didn't understand. I mean, it sounds like you did a lot of fundraisers, and I didn't understand how the gaming license played into it.
So going forward, at this point in time, we will need to have this resolution with the state so that we can continue to receive raffle licenses.
Okay. So it's for raffles. So
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For clarifying. Any other? I guess I should have asked if anybody else had any questions for Mr. Miller. Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Milan.
Yes.
Councilmember Moffitt.
Yes.
Councilmember Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Woolley. Yes. Councilmember Aris.
Yes.
And the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is presentation of the Clawson Redevelopment Ready Communities Baseline Evaluation by Elizabeth King from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation.
Before I let Elizabeth speak, I just wanted to kind of recap. I know not everyone here was on council when you first approved a resolution on August 15th of last year. Part of that process, this is the redevelopment ready communities process. Part of that was, first passing the resolution to support our engagement and pursuing the certification through the state. And the second step of that was to complete our self-evaluation, which was submitted last October. So we are an engaged community within the Redevelopment Ready's community program, and Elizabeth King is our primary representative for this program. We also have Dominic Romano, who is another one of our MEDC contacts, and they're going to tell you all about RRC.
Welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having, oh, I think I'm short. Thank you for having me here this evening. As she said, my name is Elizabeth King, and I'm your Redevelopment Ready Communities Planner with the MEDC, and Dominic is the Community Assistance Team member. And so tonight I'm going to give you an overview of the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, just a little refresher. I'm going to give you some details about the baseline evaluation we performed on your development-related practices, and then I'm going to tell you about the next steps that need to be taken to move forward with the Redevelopment Ready Communities program. So the Redevelopment Ready Communities program is part of the Community Development Division, which is one of three main divisions at the MEDC. The others being marketing and promotion. So you guys are probably all familiar with our Pure Michigan campaign, and the business development division. So while the business development division is primarily focused on attracting those large employers to the state, the community development division is really focused on creating great places, because we know that those are also required to attract talent to our state and to our communities. The Redevelopment Ready Communities program is really the foundation of community development at the MEDC. And what we do is we look at your plans, policies, and practices and their relation to development, and then just give you some ways that you can move forward so that your planning practices are really based on a solid foundation for economic development. Here you'll see the business talent place connection. So talent wants place, place needs business, business needs talent. Nowadays, more so than ever, people are choosing where they want to live first and finding jobs second. So that means they're moving to places that offer them a high quality of life. So it's extra important that we get it right. Here you'll see our RRC guiding principles. So the Redevelopment Ready Communities program is a self-help program. So we aren't going to complete the best practices for you, but we are going to provide you with the tools you need to attract investment in your community. We also believe in transparency, and that when practices are clear, transparent, and predictable, people can venture into your community, or even your residents can figure out how to get through the development review process easily. We really believe in partnerships as well. So the MEDC views the city of Clawson as a partner, and we really encourage you to view your residents as partners as well, and create plans that are based on strong community vision and support. So here you'll see an overview of the RRC certification process. Step one is engagement. As Susie said, Clawson became formally engaged in October 2017. So step two is evaluation. I have written your evaluation. You should be getting a copy of it. And from here, we ask that you pass a resolution to continue with the program. within 30 days. Once you've passed that resolution, the staff will start working on completing the missing best practices. And once all of the missing best practices are completed, the city will be certified as a redevelopment-ready community. Right now, we have over 245 communities of all sizes across the state participating in the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, and we have 29 certified communities. Here you'll see the 6 RRC best practices. They range from best practice 1, which contains your essential planning documents like the master plan, downtown plan, capital improvements plan, all the way down to best practice 6, which really focuses on economic development and marketing strategies for the city. So here we have Clawson's evaluation snapshot. And what this tells us is, what this shows is that the 6 RRC best practices are based on like 41 objective measurable criteria. So green means Clawson is meeting the best practice, yellow means a little more work needs to be done, and red means that best practice is missing. As you can see, Clawson's at 40%, so you guys are doing pretty good, and that's because of the great work of your council here, your planning commission, and the staff. And Susie has been just a pleasure to work with through this whole process. I always have a lot of questions that need to be answered to write these reports, and she's been so accommodating. So the criteria that the city's already meeting, just an overview, is you have a master plan based on the community vision. It's implementable with timelines, responsible parties, talks about walkability and a variety of housing types. Your downtown plan coordinates well with your master plan, and again, focuses on pedestrian-friendly infrastructure, and it has a strong projects and visions. You have a zoning ordinance that allows for a variety of housing types, has non-motorized transportation standards. You have a lot of flexible parking options. You have some green infrastructure standards. And what's a real strong point is you have some form-based standards and images, so your zoning ordinance is easy to follow. You also have a pretty good development review process with a clearly documented internal staff review policy, and the staff is tracking projects from intake to completion. So these are some of the yellow items, the items that the city is making good progress on, but could use some improvements. So that would be advertising the pre-application meetings a little more prominently on the website so people know that they can come in and talk to the staff about their concepts. Creating a developer-focused feedback form and implementing that feedback so you know the things that need to be improved. Just updating the development review manual a little bit because it's pretty good, but it needs just a few tweaks as far as some timelines for that predictability element. A couple other things that need to be done. Best practice 4 really focuses on board and commission education and training. So we really want, for the predictability, we really want to be job descriptions for the boards and kind of skill sets about what you're looking for those boards and commissions. And then tracking mechanisms to track trainings for the staff boards and commissions so that you're getting the most out of the trainings, and just a forum for sharing the information that comes out of those trainings. Another couple items that you are making good progress on but need some improvement is the capital improvements plan. So you do outline 5 years of capital improvements in your budget, but we really ask for 6 years of capital improvements, and we ask that those projects be connected to the master plan, downtown plan, and economic development strategy. And the zoning ordinance needs to be reviewed to ensure that it aligns with your new master plan, and the zoning map on the website should be updated. So the opportunities for improvement, we asked the community to create a public participation strategy related to development so that you're engaging your residents early in the development review process and reporting on the outcomes of those development or those public participation meetings in a consistent manner. We also ask that you have redevelopment-ready sites and have a vision for those redevelopment-ready sites and create packages to market them, so you're being proactive and engaging the community when you're making those. The old way of that process would be a developer would just come into the community and say, we want to do this on this site. What we would like to see is a more proactive method where you're engaging your community to see what they want on the site, so you can go out to developers and say, this is what would be supported in Clawson. And we also ask that the community creates a marketing strategy, which is actually one of your goals in your master plan, so just so that you have consistent messaging and you're promoting and you have a plan for the promotion of the community. The good news is we offer a lot of guides to complete those, and we're always offering assistance to help the city work through those processes. So here you'll see the steps moving forward. They're kind of what I've already gone over. We'll ask that you pass the resolution to proceed with the program. Hopefully I haven't scared you away from it. You'll work on continuing with the missing best practices. The staff will update me quarterly with how they're working to meet the best practices, and when they're all complete, you'll be certified. The good news is you're not alone. So the redevelopment ready process is not really meant to be a one-man or woman show. You're really supposed to work with your partners, your community partners like the DDA, so it doesn't all have to be the city is doing this. The documents could come from the DDA or other community partners. So now I'd like to highlight the value of the program. So the RRC certification is a signal that the community is open for business. We are a third-party review of the policies and procedures. It's an ongoing partnership with the MEDC. We offer technical assistance matching funds to complete the best practices. And then once the community is certified, we also offer some site-based funding. We offer continued technical assistance, and by being engaged in the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, the city is eligible for community development funding consideration. More resources and information about our program can be found at myplace.org, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have now.
How long do you expect the process, I mean, I'm sure it depends on staff and things like that, but is there a timeline on when this needs to be completed, or we just need to make sure we're making quarterly progress?
You just need to make sure you're making quarterly progress. I just had a community finish it in about 5 months, but I think they really made it a team sport to get it done. So it just really depends. We've had communities in the program for over 3 years, so it just kind of depends on the pace the community wants to go at.
You mentioned that once we're certified, there's some funding opportunities for different things. What kind of things would there be funding opportunities for once it's completed? Like, what would the money be used for?
So we offer site-specific pre-development assistance. So if there was a city-owned site that you needed some visioning or a study done around, that kind of site-specific funding, but it really depends on what you need done. It's tailored to each community. So it just depends on what your priorities are. We're flexible.
But it's specific to city-owned property?
Right now, it is specific to city-owned property.
And is it specific to preparation for tasks, or is it, yeah?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
pre-development.
Gotcha.
All right, well, if no one else has any questions, thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of a request for a lot split by Lynn Scalzi of 607 South Chocolate, parcel ID number 2506154007, located within the city of Clawson. A request was made by the owner of the property, and the request involves the property parcel ID that was mentioned, and the split would allow the owner to maintain one residential home and build another home in compliance with the R2 Single Family Residential District. And we have Mr. Albus from the Building Department here to speak.
Madam Mayor and members of council, the lot split tonight is for a residential property known as 607 South Chocolate. You should have had in your packets the applicant's October 25th, 2018 completed application and drawings and surveys. Michelle Kuku is here tonight. She is one of the applicants. She would like to speak or answer questions of this board, if you have any. You should have the planner's November 6th review letter. Did McKenna end up sending anybody tonight? McKenna was supposed to have somebody here to speak on Mario's review letter. Apparently, they didn't get anybody here in time. You have my November 7th review letter, review memorandum. We also included the pertinent ordinances, 2 memos from legal counsel dated November 15th and November 9th, and a response memo from me dated November 29th, and a council resolution approving a large lot split dated May 6, 2014. Sorry in advance for all the documentation and stuff that you guys received on this. But it's a very important thing that's the applicant is applying for, and we have to have all the facts and discussion on it to resolve the issues. So my original findings of facts was the city council is to review all land divisions. It's part of section 34-1224A of our ordinances. The property is commonly known as 607 South Chocolate, is 109 feet wide and 145 feet deep. It is double size of 157 residential properties within 2 blocks in all directions. We've had counts up into the 160s, and it matters what you define as 2 blocks. And so I went with the lowest number, 157. By our ordinance, it is considered a single-family residential large lot under section 34-658D. So it meets one of the criteria as being over 100 feet wide. Does not meet the criteria of being 200 feet deep, and it does not meet the criteria of being 20,000 square feet. That'll become more important later in my discussions. The single-family residential large lot ordinance does not prohibit the splitting of a large lot into 2 residential lots. I read through the ordinance in detail. I had the planner read through the ordinance in detail, and that's why we came up with the conclusion to approve the large lot, or the splitting of this lot from a large lot into 2 regular residential lots. Purpose clause in this ordinance says the residents of the city have consistently expressed their desire to maintain the small-town characteristics of the city and maintain the integrity of the residential neighborhoods as they exist today. As I already explained, the residential neighborhood characteristic for the surrounding homes is much smaller lots than this one, actually half the size of it, so this lot split would be in conformance to that. The lot split, if approved by this council, would allow the owner to maintain one residence and build another home in compliance with the R2 single-family residential district. Based on the above findings of facts, the applicant has submitted the unique location of the lot, the planning consultant's report, and a review of all pertinent ordinances. The Building and Planning Department recommends City Council approve the lot split as requested. Now, my second memorandum I will summarize to try and keep things flowing here. It was to clarify the issues raised in legal counsel's memos. Since the creation of the ordinance in 2012, I have verbally told people that they could not split large lots. This is the second application to split a large lot. So this is the first one was reviewed by our planner back in the time, and reviewed by this council, zoning board, and approved by this council in 2014. I made no promises and assurances to the applicant on what the decision of this council is going to be made tonight. She can verify that. We've known each other for a long time. The third one was McKenna was going to have somebody here. Apparently, they didn't send anybody. One of the things that legal counsel and I disagreed on was the timing of this meeting. Section 34-1224B states that the land division application shall be scheduled by the city clerk at the first regularly scheduled meeting of city council within 45 days of the receipt of the completed application as determined by the city attorney/city planner. The city planner received this application on October 25th, 2018. That's why you got the emails back and forth with John and I for the last city council meeting, because I thought it had to be on that last agenda. The applicant agreed to have it here tonight because of the size of the last agenda's meeting. Both myself and the city planner think that there is legitimate planning considerations justifying this lot split and would allow substantial justice to the applicant. And it would maintain the integrity of the neighborhood as it exists today, as listed in the purpose clause of the large lot ordinance. One of the rights that this property loses, because it's declared as a large lot, a residential home that's destroyed can be rebuilt on a normal R1 and R2 residential lot. If this home is destroyed by fire or accident or whatever, they would have to seek 2 variances to build a new home on it, because it doesn't meet 2 of the criteria of the large lot development requirements, having it 200 feet deep and having it 2,000 square feet. So this lot doesn't meet 2 of the development requirements. So that takes away a right of this person that is enjoyed by all of her neighbors in that same subdivision. There was talking about this lot split setting a precedence to allow developers to attempt larger lot splits. Opinion, the door would open to developers attempting to obtain options on larger lots. The precedence, if that is the case, would have been set by the council resolution in 2014, allowing a large lot to be split. It was actually combined with a lot that was landlocked behind it, and then split and got a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals because one of the lots only had 45 foot of frontage instead of 100 foot of frontage. And then it was approved by council by resolution back on, I think it was May 6, 2014. Oh, April. Yeah, May 6, 2014, and the ZBA on April 17, 2014. Both of these lots were developed with much larger homes that were not in character with the rest of the homes in the neighborhood. This lot split, it is their intent to keep the original home on this lot and then use the other lot on this to develop another single-family home in the same size lot as the rest of the neighborhood. So it was said that a denial of the lot split upon the fact council is recommending to legal counsel to amend, clarify, or refine the ambiguity raised by the planner and building official can be made is true. If you deny the lot, you should only deny the lot if you believe this ordinance intended to prevent this type of lot split, to create these two residential lots in this neighborhood. But if you're assuming that if denying it, the applicant does have the right per section 34-1227A, I'm paraphrasing, any person aggrieved by a city council can appeal the decision to the ZBA. And then once the ZBA hears it, I think it's a standard law that John is familiar with. Now, what I'm saying is the unique location of this lot I'll point to it down here on South Chocolate. It's a single lot with all these residential neighborhoods, so the character of the neighborhood is not changing by allowing this lot to be split. The original intent of the ordinance of preserving large lots was to preserve the character of the neighborhood. If you see in the rest of the city, there's areas of the city where there are entire blocks, entire neighborhoods, where the lots are all large lots. And if you look through here on those neighborhoods, that was the original intent of the ordinance. The original intent of the ordinance, I don't believe, addressed these lots. Even if you look at this map that was set up for the large lot preservation, the original square feet was to be 10,000 square feet or larger, and the ordinance was actually changed to 20,000 square feet. So that's my presentation. I'm standing by the presentation of facts and still recommend the lot to be split.
Ms. Kukuk, did you want to speak? Good evening.
A little unusual for me to be on this side of the mic, but here I am. I think Jim pretty much covered most of what I was going to speak on tonight, but the first thing I wanted to say was that I felt that the lot had been classified incorrectly. And by that being said, Mr. Elvis already stated that if the house was to be torn down or burned or have to be replaced, it doesn't meet the development standards for a large lot. It doesn't meet the standards. So it would require variances right off the start. So I'm looking at that as this has made my lot non-conforming because now this has been put on it. So I was looking at it that way, that the fact that the intent of the ordinance, and I can speak to the intent of the ordinance. I was here. I was involved in a lot of the discussions on it. I do believe that and I think Councilmember Ayers was present, that the intent of the ordinance obviously had a lot to do with the Lincoln property, was the reason why this ordinance was developed. And the Lincoln property being a very large parcel, which everyone's familiar with. And they had originally wanted to build, I want to say like 12 condos on that property, something like that, or maybe more.
Maybe 6.
How many?
6.
6. Well, they got approved for that, but they have applied for more.
They couldn't do it. They
Yeah.
got 6.
So anyways, they had applied for a lot, and that really did cause the residential neighborhood to be upset, understandably, because they had this nice park in their backyard, is the way I look at it, because it's a beautiful piece of land. And all these condos were going to be placed in there and would change the whole look of that neighborhood. I know that was the intent, and I do know when they did this overlay, I totally, you can see different parcels throughout. I think that it's unfair to the owner of the property to put a stipulation on him, especially in this circumstance when you're talking about making it, the purpose clause is there and states that it meets the characteristics of the neighborhood, and it does. We're not changing that. We don't plan on changing that, and that's not the intent. And so if the purpose clause means what it says, then we are definitely keeping within the characteristics of the neighborhood. And the only thing I was going to read was just that I'm requesting the approval of the lot split based on, the fact that the building and planning director, as well as the city planner, have interpreted the ordinance and suggested recommendation of approval, stating that I've met the requirements. That's number one. Number two is the large lot ordinance does not prohibit the lot splits, but basically states that the purpose clause of the ordinance intent to maintain the small town characteristic of the city. This request is not contrary to the intent of the ordinance for residential preservation, which maintains the integrity of the residential neighborhood as it exists today. Within 2 blocks, as Mr. Alves mentioned, we're talking lots are all consistently 47 and up to 54 frontage. And if we split these 2 lots, we would be looking at a 54-foot frontage. It would conform to the R1, R2 residential district requirements, both of which have, the lot size, width, and square foot of 5,500 and 50 feet respectively. Allowing the property to be developed into 2 residential parcels would also increase the tax base for the city as well, allowing a second house to be built. So that's what I have to say, and I don't know if you have any questions for me.
I guess my one question is, this has been identified as a large lot for many, many years, and as the home, the owner of the property knew that it was set up that way. Why now, or why wasn't there those arguments made when it was
Well,
set as a large lot, and that maybe you didn't agree with it at that time?
Yeah. The home belonged to my mother, who passed away in September or August. And she had talked about it. However, I was working for the city at the time, and she never approached the city for it. But now that she has passed away, we've been given the duty to take care of the estate and handle her business and her finances and take care of everything. And we feel like this is the best way to handle it.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
I have a question for Jim. Or questions for Jim. Don't be annoyed. Hi, Jim. When lots were designated as large lots, were owners notified of that?
Individual owners were not notified. We had public hearings on the ordinances, and it was publicly notified.
So, okay, so most people ignored it because they didn't think it was important to them then. So in a situation like this, now it's important. My real concern, personally, it makes sense to me to do it. I like the whole keeping character of the neighborhood. However, on planning a couple of years ago, we had a gentleman come before that wanted to split a larger lot than this. It was on the corner of somewhere near Kenwood. And this is what I remember about him. He wanted to turn it into 3 or 4 lots. And he had his description was an ugly cinder block building, that if we did not agree to give him that split, he was going to leave exactly the same until forever. He didn't care. It would be an eyesore, and he basically said, deal with it. So we said no to him, and I'm just curious. I just want everyone to be treated the same. And if it's a matter of 10,000 to 20,000 square feet, if that's the determining factor on all of these lots, then I think we should inform people of whether or not they are under these restrictions or not, and then stick to whatever the restrictions are, if that makes any sense. Which it does, don't look at me like that.
So I think both John and I agree that council should direct administration to clean up this ordinance, whether you approve or deny this lot split.
Yeah, it's not a criticism to anyone. I just remember sitting on planning, and this guy was very impassioned. He had a great idea. He wanted to better his home. He wanted to make some money. How do you make money? Real estate's the way you do it around here when things are booming. Yeah, it would have been great for him. And I know we told him no. And I just want it to be fair. If there's a restriction for people, We need to make sure that they understand what the restrictions are in a situation such as this, because it's unique. There aren't that many people that are affected by it. So after this is all taken care of and we clean up the ordinances, perhaps we could give some notice to people to let them know that they're under these rules. That's just a letter.
John, I know this property pretty well because it's around my neighborhood. What would happen to us if we agreed on this?
Well, here's the observation. First of all, this is one of the rare times I've been put in a very uncomfortable position because I've worked with Michelle for a long time, and we had a good relationship, and I'm taking a position diametrically opposed. The reason why I take that is that there was a considerable discussion over a protracted period of time after we went through the discussion regarding the Lincoln property and 6 condos going in there. The discussion expanded to the large lots, which are characteristic with the creation of this community. They were part of plats that were developed when the property was platted in the early teens into the 20s. So there was a purpose by the planner or by the developers to have large lots, a variety, and then the smaller lots as well. The discussion, when it centered around it, was a preservation, really, of the large lots. And so the ordinance came into play with that dictate. When you look at this one lot on Chocolate, it is similar to several other single lots in a subdivision around the city. And I gave you a map that circled some of those. So the first dilemma I have as legal counsel for the city is in granting this lot split, you will have a number of other requests for lot splits of those properties, which will then swing into the larger areas of that. Now, that is a potential. So I've got to look at the potential consequence from this action. You can make the amendments that try to prevent that, but the problem is that someone's going to come in and say, well, wait a minute, if you denied a lot of lot splits and you granted this, how come you're denying mine now? And therefore, I'm being unfairly treated. That's the argument that's going to be advanced. So the best way to do it is to look at the ordinance and do the clarification and go back. I mean, as it talks about the 45-day period, the language in the ordinance, 341224A, says, shall be scheduled by the city clerk at the first regularly scheduled meeting of city council within 45 days of receipt of the completed application as determined by the city attorney and/or the city clerk. So the city attorney, with his opinion,
Not the city
determined-
clerk, the city planner.
Well,
You
it
had
says in
that
here,
wrong.
the language, city clerk, so it's city planner. But the city attorney is still there. So I determined the legal issue was big enough on creating a precedent that it ought not to go. Now, I talked to Mario, I talked to Jim, they both agreed, and I agree. You clarify the language in the purpose clause. If you do that and you're now saying the 10,000, I mean, in the ordinance that I have, it says 10,000 square feet. And on those factors that you mentioned, on square footage as well as lot size, it's any one of those. They don't have to all be met. It's any one of them. So I think this is a...
That's to declare it a large lot.
Yeah.
The development standards are 20,000.
And that's where the conflict is. So if you have that conflict, because it also says 10,000 square feet in there, so that's where you have the conflict, and you've got to resolve that. The only way you're going to deter any litigation is by dissolving that and making the ordinance amended in the format that it can comply with reality as it exists now. If you don't do that, you will subject yourself to litigation. If you do it, you have a rationale behind it based on what's been presented tonight, based on what you may say, that justifies that with the passage of time and with the amendments, it needs some clarification. And from a planning standpoint, that's legitimate.
I was here when this large lot, I'll say it was a movement by our residents. And it wasn't, just in regard to Lincoln. I mean, I think that sparked a lot of the residents to be in action and want to make a difference. It also was the impact of, Birmingham making McMansions on 45-foot pieces of property and 50-foot pieces of property. And they didn't want that to happen. And so the large lot ordinance and marking certain properties as large lots also addressed that it would prevent developers to come in and put McMansions on sites of homes. And there's no other building restrictions specifically, except I believe there's a house has to be less than 3,500 square feet is out there. But I think part of the residents' intent was that you couldn't build a huge house on a 50-foot lot. And if you left the large lots as they were marked, it would, detour some of that.
We have ordinances in place that the front yard setback has to be a minimum of 25 feet or matching the rest of the neighborhood. Side yard setbacks have to be 10 feet and 5 feet. Or if it has an attached garage, it's 5 feet and 5 feet. And the rear yard has to be 35 feet with a maximum lot coverage of all residential structures on the property as 35% of the lot. So that would address the McMansion issues. John had referred back into the teens. I looked up the plats in the teens for this area, and they were all 300 and some feet wide by 145 to 200 feet deep. That's the way in the 1919s they were laid out.
1915, too.
But our ordinance addresses it as the character of the neighborhood as it exists today. And that's why I'm saying this individual large lot within the neighborhood where the character of the neighborhood is 50-plus foot, 54-foot wide lots is the character of the neighborhood today, as it exists today.
And that's fine, but if you grant the relief now, then the other lots in the surrounding area that are similarly situated will be up for being split. And if that's a decision that you're okay with, that's fine.
I have questions here for Mr. Elvis and Mr. Kingsup. Mr. Elvis, you've verbally told folks that that splitting of large lots is not permitted. What about this case led you down this path?
The actual written application for the lot split caused me to do a detailed review of the ordinance. And upon the detailed review of the ordinance, I found out that in this case, with the unique location of the lot, with the character of the neighborhood, the ordinance didn't say that a large lot couldn't be split. Like I said, in the neighborhoods where the character of the lot is a large lot, I would interpret the ordinance different and say, no, you can't split that large lot. So this was the written application, and I do have to review it on the written ordinance. The planner has to review it on the written ordinance. So if you do approve this and you agree that, we all agree that administration should clean the ordinance. This could be approved or has to be reviewed under this written ordinance, whether it's approved or denied.
Thank you. Mr. Kingsup, you were involved, I assume, in drafting this ordinance in 2012?
Biddy and I were.
Okay.
Was involved in those proceedings.
So, and you said that you agree with Jim and Mario, the planner, that it does need to be cleaned up. What and you mentioned the 10,000, 20,000 foot discrepancy. What else, is there anything else that needs to be cleaned up?
I don't know. I've identified at least 9 lots that are similar to this, so I think you need a thorough investigation of that map and then maybe revise it. You may well have, here's really another issue that you need to get into. The question becomes one of those large lots that are separate from the regular size lots in that particular subdivision. Was that by intention of the developer? Because when they came, they could have developed large lots for a specific purpose. Recreation areas, maybe a school, whatever. And it could be part of that plat. And so what you might want to do in the review is test some of the site plans that were recorded on these lots to identify whether there was a particular reason for the large lots in those areas. Now, as Jim said, some of them were larger and then were subdivided into smaller lots, still leaving one. And so that raises a question in my mind, having gone over many site plans over the years of creation of many of these subdivisions, that there would always be a statement in the restrictions to the site plan that might give the reason for that.
Mr. Kingsup, is there something you can read me in ordinance that prohibits the splitting of large lots?
No, and it was purposely omitted because of the purpose clause. It was
Okay.
clearly stated in that.
Yeah, and at the time of the passing of the ordinance, and I have it here, at the time of the passing of the ordinance, there was language that was entered into the minutes, at least, that this ordinance was to allow for the preservation of parcels of land that meet specific criteria and to provide specific recommendations to ensure development of such parcels is in keeping with the city's goals and objectives. And that's the purpose that you're speaking of. So with the city's goals and objectives and in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, excuse me, I did look at the GIS information from Oakland County, and on South Chocolate, there are 58 other properties. 57 of those 58 properties are 145 feet deep, which is the same as this one. There's one property that has a little strip that extends. And as a result of this lot split, 2 properties would be created. They will both be wider than 50 other properties on the street. In my opinion, that is in keeping, this is opinion, but that is in keeping with the character of that neighborhood. And it's my opinion that without anything preventing this lot split, by your own admission, that I think we should move forward with it.
It's your call.
So I have questions too. And I jotted this one down while you were speaking. And what I'm trying to wrap my head around is a lot of everybody else here seems to have been involved or at the time that this ordinance was passed. And I wasn't involved. But so trying to understand, can you tell me how many other parcels of land that have been identified as large lots would meet the same criteria that this property meets? And is that the ones that he's circled here? So is it potentially, I guess I'm trying to understand, we have this whole group of property that was put into this, or is identified by this large lot ordinance, but now we're saying, a percentage of them maybe should not have had been included. And so, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's, 10 other properties here. If all 10 of these people came, then and they could meet the same criteria, we'd have to approve those as well.
Correct. Now, you realize we have about 5,500 residential lots in the city.
Oh, I know.
So, you have to ask, was it the intent of the original ordinance to allow these? I'm saying it isn't, or to have these as large lots and prevent them from being developed or split as their surrounding neighborhoods. So he circled 10, what'd you say, about 50 of them throughout the community?
Well, there may be, I didn't go over the whole thing, but I just
So-
circled some in
So
that
we're
area.
talking a small percentage of that would fall under the same character as this. So 10 to 50 out of 5,500. I don't know exactly how many we have now.
So is your intent in cleaning up the ordinance to change the ordinance such that these now identified lots would be removed from being restricted under the ordinance?
That would be my intent, but I would have to leave it up to the planning commission to give a recommendation to this council.
And so I guess to Mr. Kingsip's point, if we approve this, we're definitely setting either the groundwork for us to have to do that or for all of these other people to come forth to request it.
No, well, he can speak for it and then I'll give an answer. Or do you want me to give my answer?
Give your answer.
Okay. If you approve it tonight and you say the ambiguity proposed or brought by the attorney, the building official, and the planner, that this ordinance needs to be cleaned up, whether it is to allow these or to not allow these in the future, that you'll just say that this administration has to correct this before we allow any more lot splits, or clean up the ordinance before we hear any more lot splits. So I'm saying that I would approve it, and then the other properties like this should be allowed to be split.
Now, and if you do that, then if you grant this lot split, and then you refer to administration to work on the revision, you might want to have in that motion that the rationale for that is that rationale expressed by Mr. Albus tonight for that additional review. That provides a sort of a restrictive effort at making the changes, so we don't get into a precedent that applies to other lots. He's sort of identified the lots in size, a singular lot in a subdivision, not amongst many others. So he's giving you the characteristics of that.
And what would the timeline be for rewriting the ordinance, getting it cleaned up and resubmitted and re-put in place?
It would probably be internally, administratively, working on the ordinance. Could probably be done before January the 1st. Getting it even forward. See, you got to put pressure on administrators and lawyers. That gets them to work.
Okay, 3
Forget the
weeks?
holidays.
Okay.
But you could probably get the draft language administratively done by the 1st of January.
Q1 in 19.
When it's scheduled for 2019, that becomes something later on. It can be the first meeting or the second meeting of that, and it starts the process.
This may be a question that's more for Michelle. I'm just curious. I walked the property last night just to get a sense of the community. And the garage, is it currently on the side with the house or the side not with the house? I can't recall.
It overhangs the proposed lot split.
So I guess I'm just going to add, so you're going to split the slot, and I would assume then you're going to,
If the lot gets split, the garage will be removed.
and then, so then the property with the house wouldn't be able to have a garage because of how the house
Well, they
is sitting
could. The
on
lot's big
property.
enough to have it sit behind.
Assuming
I'm
the
sure.
house is removed, I assume? So then sell it to.
You mean the current house? No. I mean, they could probably put a garage behind. I'm not sure the setbacks on that.
House
I
is
believe
pretty
the
far
house
back.
has a 10-foot wide for a driveway to go to a garage. So this garage either has to be torn down or picked up and moved onto the house lot.
Well, because I think the
if it's
driveway
allowed.
would have to be split as well, because it's
No, I
not
think the
clear.
driveway's all on one lot, according to the survey. The driveway would be right, I think, I don't remember how, we looked at that, Jim. But the intent would be that garage would be removed. We didn't want to remove it before we requested lot split, obviously, because as is right now, it's there. But if it's granted, that the garage will be removed.
Yeah, according to the documentation provided, there would be 12 feet between the existing house and the new lot line.
Yeah, so I didn't think it was enough space for that.
Here's the document he's referring to, showing the 12 feet. So the existing driveway would have to be removed with the garage.
Right.
So a new driveway could be poured. A standard driveway is 10 feet.
I just worry about the legal aspect of it coming back and kicking us in the head.
Well, it's a risk. I mean,
Yeah, risk is, we don't need lawsuits, I mean, I'd love to see that thing get split myself personally. Because I've wondered why it hasn't been split before, but now I know why. Yeah, I don't want any lawsuits, that's the only thing. So if there's some way we could word this and,
no, you can't. I mean, I've represented developers, and if you adopt a motion that grants a split, you set the precedent. What would delay other requests is directing the administration. That's why I say you recite the purpose that Jim has given on why you have to have the revisions.
Okay.
And then once you start in that process to amend the ordinance, you have a legitimate basis for holding up on any lot split requests.
So we
There's
make-
case law on that, but you've got to commence the process.
If it was denied here, they could then go to the zoning board of appeals. At the same time, you're dealing with the ordinances and have not opened us up to a lawsuit during that time? How's the timing of that work? Or doesn't?
Well,
Since she applied under this current written ordinance, the zoning board of appeals has to review it under this written ordinance
Right.
also. So even if we did rewrite the ordinance to prevent this in the future, which I'm against, it wouldn't be reviewed under the new ordinance. It would be reviewed under the existing ordinance.
Correct, but the zoning board of appeals could approve it under the current ordinance. And we have not, and then we're fixing the ordinances, so
Well-
from a lawsuit standpoint, you're,
no, as I stated, first of all, you're putting them through an extra step. And as I stated before, there's case law that basically says that if you direct administration to expeditiously work on developing a new ordinance, and they start doing that, and it becomes in a format that's presented to the Planning Commission, you can delay any application that comes in because you are changing the ability of the person to get the lot split, and there are legitimate business reasons or planning reasons behind it. And let them go to court and sue you to try to get it without going through the process. And the court's going to look and say, look, they identified problems, and they're trying to amend them right now.
well, but I guess the long and short of it, though, is based on what changes we're talking about doing, everybody will be able to then split their lot regardless. So, I mean, it's somewhat pointless
So are you saying
exercise
as
to a
part of our
degree.
motion, we say, so we make one?
No.
No.
If you want to grant them, then you grant it, and then you have a second motion referring to administration. If you don't want to do that and go to the extent of the zoning board of appeals, you have to make a decision that's factually based, denying the relief sought.
I just don't understand upon which basis we would be denying the lot split tonight. That's where I'm at.
And if others of you have that same question, then that might be your answer.
Well, is there an answer to that? Is the basis simply that it doesn't rise to the definition in the ordinance, or we're deeming it so, or what would be the reason? Because that's right, if there's not a reason, then there's not a reason.
First of all, the reason might be that, Well, let me ask you this. Has there been any lot split of a similar sized lot?
Before,
No, after the passage of the ordinance? Or is this a first?
This is the first. I
well,
think.
the first was the 2014 one.
Well, what were the circumstances on that, though?
Those were, it was
The Lincoln House.
a developer owned the property for,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
on Lincoln.
Yeah, there are enough exceptions there, having been involved in that, that is not identical to this
Yeah,
situation.
it's not a similar.
So I'm asking particularly as to this situation, has there been any other requests for a lot split that you may have denied, or have there been any other requests filed that haven't been acted on? So this would be the first one.
This is the only written one.
All right.
We've had verbal that Paula identified
All right.
before.
If this is the only one, then if you want the zoning board of appeals to hear it, what you can do is develop I gave you my summaries and two of them, and indicate that you're denying the request because it fails to meet the existing requirements, period. They then have a right to appeal your decision to the zoning board of appeals. Administration then have to get together to work on an amended ordinance. That's the only way. I mean, if you feel that way. If you don't feel like doing that, then grant it, and just run the risk that the administration's going to be expeditious in developing an ordinance that has immediate study by the planning commission, immediate quote unquote, by the planning commission, report from the planner.
So to that end, what's your commitment to immediately redoing the ordinance?
John said we can get it done in 3 weeks, and I
Said we can do a draft ordinance. I
Or-
didn't say you
Draft.
could get the process done.
But
Yeah.
as the head of the department, is that your commitment?
Sure, I'll work on the ordinance as soon as possible. And, well, we're hiring new planners tonight, so I'm making a commitment for
You and
people I
I are going to
haven't.
work on that.
Okay.
And then we'll hand it over to them to refine it.
So,
Again, our city attorney said that there's nothing in the ordinance that prevents this lot split.
That's right.
So, Madam Mayor, I move the land division request to split the property commonly known as 607 South Chocolate, parcel ID number 1625061540007, into two 54.5-foot wide by 145-foot deep parcels being legally described as Parcel A, the north 54.5 feet of Lot 160 of Kenwood Garden subdivision, as recorded in Labor 14 of Plats, page 9, Oakland County Records, and Parcel B, the south 54.5 feet of the north 109 feet of part of Lot 160 of Kenwood Garden subdivision, as recorded in Labor 14 of Plats, page 9, Oakland County Records, be approved.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Harris?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
No? Don't look at me.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe it's not appropriate, but I'm disappointed that it took a written application to be done before the research was done on the obvious problems within our ordinance. So I'm hoping that we change that a little bit. So, thank you.
May I just say, I'm not personally opposed to your lot split. I really want things to be done the same for everyone. I just think that's really important.
So to that end, do we have to wait until new business to make a new motion to have them do to revise the ordinance?
Or we would amend our agenda.
So we make a motion to amend the agenda?
Or we
To
could wait until
direct
new business.
administration to work on that? I believe we've already directed them. Do we need a motion to do that?
No.
Do we need a
Mike,
motion for that?
parliamentary procedure, can they do the motion now?
You've already approved,
Directed them to work on it? Do we need a motion to do that, Mr. Smith, or just directing them is adequate?
Mr. King's up.
Mr. King's
that's
up?
more of
Mr.
the legal, it comes back to the legal things of
I-
standing on that.
You know, if you want to use the precision, then you have to amend the agenda to make the motion. That's the technical. It's no major error if you make the motion now without doing the amendment process, because it's the same subject matter that you just discussed, and it's a point that arose under the discussion.
So, Madam Mayor, I move that we amend the agenda for purposes of discussion of revising the ordinance.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Harris?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
And the motion carries. The next item on the agenda, pardon me?
That was amending.
Let's amend it. No, we have
So
to-
then,
Oh, make a motion to.
Madam Mayor, I move that we direct the city staff to expeditiously create revise the large lot ordinance to accommodate the necessary changes
As enunciated by Mr. Albus.
as enunciated by Mr. Albus.
Get her done.
Is that support?
Is that a second?
Harris?
Support, I'm sorry.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Harris?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by our finalists for City Planning Services for the City of Clawson. And the first presenter will be Beckett and Rader. The applicants were asked to provide the following: a sample monthly cost breakdown, sample training education cost breakdown, a temporary certificate of occupancy recommendation opinion, and a sample site plan review.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We appreciate the opportunity to come back in front of you. Today with me is Michelle Bennett from our firm. Leah Dumichel, who would be our backup, is out of town in the west side of the state right now. So if we go through what we did for the finalist questions that you presented to us, first off, temporary certificates of occupancy. I don't know anywhere that I've ever worked where we haven't heard that we're the worst city, we're the worst village when it comes to building departments, we're the slowest. I ran a building department, I ran a planning firm, I ran a planning department. I've been a consultant for numerous communities, and it's always slow government. But what I find most of the time is if you tell them in the very beginning what they need to do, and you don't add anything on, and you're very upfront with them, you don't run into any real problems. Certificates of occupancy, I think you have to be careful when you grant them. They have to be minor issues, not any health or safety issues. And I also feel that you need to have a good working relationship with that applicant to date, because too many times, once you allow them to get a C of O, and if they haven't completed everything, it's much more difficult to get them to do it. So I think they're good in a few select instances, again, for health, not for health and safety, not for anything major, but for a few minor issues that aren't anything to do with the safety or the health, then we're okay with providing those. We don't grant them too much, but if we did, that would be the reasons. Do you want to ask any questions while we go through this, or no?
Not yet.
I'm sorry?
I said not yet.
Okay. Our cost breakdown, you have the fixed retainer cost, the meetings, the Thursday office hours. We're open to If you move some stuff like to Tuesdays, we might have a reduced rate since we have to be here for Tuesday PC meetings, but Thursdays are fine. I think that's when your ZBA is. Our training, I am a certified trainer from the Michigan Association of Planning. I have done the Planning and Zoning Essentials for various communities. I have also provided other training opportunities, whether it's Brownfield. I'm a Brownfield certified. I went through the Brownfield nuts and bolts, I should say. Form-based code certified, charrette certified. So any of those type of training, we would be glad to offer to you if you need it. Moving on to page 5, our site plan review. What we normally do on a site plan is we call out deficiencies or where they're not meeting the minimum requirements of the ordinance. And what we do at our Plan Commission meeting is to let the applicant and the Plan Commission know that you could stop us at any time, but what we're going to do is point out where they fail to meet the minimum standards. And so when we look at your review of the church, I want to point out a couple things before we get into it. First off is our LUPA, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. That's a federal statute, 1996, that basically says it's very difficult, if not impossible, to limit religious and other institutionalized persons' facilities from going anywhere. You know, when I grew up, I shouldn't date myself, but when I grew up, churches were neighborhoods, and we walked to our church, and we know the Lutherans went one way and the Catholics went the other, and we walked to church. And then churches started to get a little bigger, less neighborhood, and locate on major boulevards, which, you know, they're being tax exempt. It wasn't exactly what cities wanted, but the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act pretty much says they could go in any zoning district at any time. And again, this has been since 1996. Also in the state of Michigan, there's been some liberal interpretation of that act, and most importantly, it was the church, I forget the name, in Southfield back a few years ago, where they got sued, the city of Southfield sued because they denied the church not the location, but because it didn't meet the parking requirements, and they were told to seek a variance. I think, as you all well know, before any applicant can sue, they have to, per state law, exhaust all administrative remedies. And so they went to get a variance for the parking, the church, and they were denied. And that brought up a lawsuit, and basically the city was told, they negotiated a settlement, but you couldn't even negotiate the parking. So with my client communities, whenever we have a church, I always defer to our legal and ask them just what you want and how far you want us to go on making them meet the minimum requirements. You know, we don't know what the law is until something is adjudicated, and we don't know what the law is, and it could change, right? And it could change with the next case. So this case was in the city of Southfield. So I always want to make my clients aware of that whenever we deal with religious institutions. That goes over our general description on page 1. On page 5 of the Church at Clawson, which is the applicant. On page 6, I note the zoning ordinance compliance, and then the documents we used, the data collection associated with this review. I think it's always important to note what you had and what you used in case you ever go to court on a situation. We note it, I think, as most firms do, and we note the dates that was received on the original date. So the standards for site plan review, we have modified our reviews and we continue to modify them. We've now gone to specifications and guidelines and then our findings, right? So you're either compliant, you're non-compliant, or as your ordinance is with many others, it could be discretionary. So what we do here is we simply going to call out what isn't compliant. And so on page 7 of the review, we note proposed building architecture shall be subject to review and approval by the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission shall have the discretion to require additional architectural improvements in the interest of meeting the interest of the district. So in our right-hand column, we note it's discretionary. The Planning Commission has the discretion to require additional improvements. We move on to materials, and we note on the rest of page 7, they're all compliant. On page 8, again, it's a discretionary requirement. To the extent feasible, all facades of the building shall be constructed of the same material. However, the Planning Commission may allow the use of a different material on the side and rear facades which are not visible from the public right-of-ways, which do not adversely affect the appearance of the building as a whole. So we note the applicant is not proposing any exterior improvements along the north elevation, that is the parking lot side of the building. The Planning Commission has the discretion to approve existing conditions. Building roofs, number 4, we note the plans and elevation did not indicate any rooftop equipment. We need to verify this by the applicant that they aren't going to have any. And then a parcel at least 42 inches high shall screen the mechanical equipment. And again, the plans and elevations do not indicate any rooftop equipment. We need verification for that. Then color and texture, we have a whole lot of inquiry from what we received from you as a review. And so basically, it's all pretty much the same. The plans and elevations do not denote a color palette proposed. We recommend that the applicant present a color rendering and an actual palette of the building material samples for the Planning Commission to review. Most of all my clients all state we want to see the building materials and the color palette. That's nothing unusual. We just didn't see it here, and we think it should be brought out. On page 9, the applicant shall present a color rendering and the color material samples to the Planning Commission, and again, no color palette has been proposed. Signage, our findings note that the applicant is compliant. Landscaping, and what we have passed out to you is an alternative way for the developer, the applicant, to reorient the parking that would provide that landscape buffer. It says a 10-foot wide landscape greenbelt shall be provided along a public street frontage. Again, that's pretty common language in most planning ordinances. And this is non-compliant. There's existing site, and there is a raised curb along the property line. The required greenbelt would require the removal of 20 parking spaces. That is a lot. Again, where parking is located along a rear or side yard facing a public right-of-way, a 10-foot greenbelt shall be provided. This is an existing site, and there is a raised curb along the property line. And then the greenbelt shall be planted to the standards noted in your section 34-1034. And we note this is an existing site, and sheet A1 notes that 10 trees are required along the 290-foot lot frontage, and 8 trees are provided. 5 trees are noted on the plan. It appears that there is a room for at least 1 additional tree in the right-of-way lawn panel south of the main entrance. On page 10, parking lot area shall be provided with landscape islands to define circulation paths. The shape and size of the landscape islands shall be designed to provide adequate areas for the survival of plantings and safe on-site circulation. This is discretionary. The planting beds between the parking aisles are within 5 feet of the concrete walkway. A potential design should be evaluated that includes removal of this raised concrete walkway and moving the plantings west to increase parking dimensions for the east half of the parking lot, and using the planting bed to assist with stormwater treatment and removal. Further on, we have non-compliance with the landscape areas perpendicular to the rows of the parking spaces. The dimensional requirements within the parking lot do not meet the requirements of section 34-1077, off-street parking lot layout, construction, and maintenance. So we note the west half of the parking lot along South Main has dimensions in excess of the ordinance, and the east half of the parking lot does not meet the minimum requirements. For moving further on 10, landscape areas and green belts abutting public right-of-ways shall be planted with salt-tolerant species to ensure survival. We got to put that snow somewhere, right? We note the autumn blaze is more drought tolerant than red maple and is somewhat tolerant of salt spray as well as road salt, but doesn't tolerate salt in its soil. If irrigated, this would help leach out the salt. So that's just our inquiry to that requirement. It should provide a long-term maintenance agreement. Again, that's pretty standard in planning ordinances for the landscaping. We note the long-term maintenance agreement is outlined on sheet AS.1. .1. The applicant indicates this will be a separate document negotiated between the applicant and the city. We were not provided that for this review. And then finally, on page 11, all lighting shall conform to the requirements, and we note that the landscape plan notes the location of 3 streetlights within the right-of-way. No exterior lighting details were provided for our review. So, based on the information provided, the following recommendations are offered to the Planning Commission for their review. The proposed exterior improvement along South Main Street will further the enhancement of the section of the business district. The style and use of the building materials complements the recent renovations across the street at the corner of South Main. The applicant needs to disclose if any rooftop HVAC equipment is existing or proposed. The applicant needs to submit a color palette. We further recommend that the applicant submit actual samples of the building material. Number 4, we would suggest the existing block wall in the north, east, and south elevations be painted a color that matches one of the colors from the proposed exterior renovations of the west elevation. The non-conforming dimensions of the parking lot are complicating the application of the landscape requirements. A redesign of the parking lot should be encouraged that removes the raised concrete walk, hampering compliance with the dimensional requirements. The requirements call for 1 tree per 30 feet of frontage, resulting in 10 trees. Due to curb cuts, this may not be practical. And an irrigation plan needs to be incorporated into the landscape plan or submitted as a separate drawing. And the long-term maintenance should be presented in draft form. An exterior lighting plan needs to be submitted. And so we would suggest, depending on whether you want a recommendation or not, we would do what you want as a client. If you wanted one, we would recommend table consideration of the site plan until the information outlined in the summary context can be submitted for review. And what we presented with you would be an alternative layout of this design. The parking dimensions would conform to the city's requirements if you did it this way. The original plan did not. There would not be a driveway on Main. Improved Main Street frontage due to hedge screening and additional canopy trees to meet the requirements on the west edge of the parking lot, and the elimination of the Main Street driveway, and then a center sidewalk with adequate width for pedestrian use. For the developer, if this was proposed, the consequence to them in terms of cost would be expanding the center walkway, adding and revising the Gladwin Street driveways, removing the Main Street driveway, and adding a street hedge offset by deletion of the center planting islands. So as we looked at this, this would be our recommendation. We don't give recommendations to redesign unless that's what the municipality we work for request us to do. We certainly would be willing to offer it to the applicant if they were asked at the meeting. But again, that is strictly up to you. We would work for you, and we would do and handle it the way you would like us to. And with that, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'd gladly answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
If, in the instance that the municipality wants you to redo designs, is this additional cost, or is that just?
Well, this cost should be borne by the applicant. I mean, the site plan, our expenses, and, you know, communities do it differently. But anything we do on account of an applicant coming in for a rezoning, a text amendment, a site plan, that should be bore, not just the planning cost, but the engineering cost and the building cost. That should all be bore by the applicant. That's what most, but not all, most of my client communities do. We are a full-service firm that has a lot, we have landscape architects and environmentalists. This is probably a little in-depth to do for free. But we would certainly, what we're trying to say is, you know, we would offer these suggestions to the applicant. We wouldn't, I've drawn out designs on the back of a napkin. But, you know, I've drawn out designs to say, you know, we don't want 3 curb cuts for the McDonald's. You're going to get 2, and this is a way you could work it. So, yeah, to do something like this would be a little in-depth, but to give that advice and to sketch some stuff out, no, we would do that as part of the cost, the review cost.
Gotcha.
I have 2 questions. One, the submission deadline for the answers was November 29th, I believe. And your document as submitted doesn't mention this at all. Was this developed after the deadline?
Yeah, I apologize for that. We were just looking at it as a firm and said, hey, why don't we, you know, see if there's a better way to do it. So yes, you're right, it was submitted after.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just to go back to TCOs, based on your understanding of our current zoning ordinance regarding TCOs, do you recommend any amendments to it, or do you think it's good as it stands?
To best answer that question, I would probably want to better understand what challenges you have had with it. And I would seem to think that you had some because you've brought it up. And so I think, you know, as you work through things, you constantly, you know, you change, you massage it and move it. So depending on what exact challenges you have, would indicate to us how would we recommend, you know, changing it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm just interested to find out why you wanted to take that front Main Street, the entrance driveway out.
There's a couple reasons, Councilman. First off, it would help the applicant meet their ordinance requirements by putting parallel parking and get rid of that. Second reason is, you know, less curb cuts on your main street is better for traffic flow. We all want traffic. Communities need traffic, especially a community like Clawson. We don't want congestion. We don't want cars backing up. And so those were the 2 reasons.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. If we don't talk to you again, have a great holiday, everybody.
You do the same, thank you.
Just there. I think this is
I'll just wait for the representatives from Giffords Webster to get here. We sequestered them away. Good evening and welcome.
Evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Well, we'll just reintroduce ourselves. I'm Rod Arroyo. I'm a partner with Giffords Webster. Jill Bain, principal planner, and senior planner Joe Tangari. We're the same team that was with you earlier, and we're happy to appear once again. And we have a short PowerPoint because we thought we'd go over the way we would, I think the charge was to present a site plan review and show you how we would present it to the Planning Commission. So I'm going to have Jill lead us through that component. So, Jill, it's all yours.
Good evening. So you have before you the site plan that we prepared for the project at 655 South Main Street. This is for the church at Clawson. The PowerPoint we put together is based on a similar PowerPoint that we use in some of our other communities. What we would propose to do with the Planning Commission is work with them to prepare the type of presentation that would be the most useful for them at a public meeting. Our intent is that this is just a general overview. The report is much more detailed, and we would assume that people have read that before they come to the meeting, although that's not always the case, but we try to work through that as best we can. So I'll go through the PowerPoint quickly, and then we'll refer to the letter as we need to do so. Again, the sample site plan review presentation. So we'll have the case number that we would have been assigned here for the church at Clawson. The request is for site plan approval for a church in the former American Legion Hall. The site is just under an acre at 0.74 acres, and it is on the east side of South Main Street, south of Gladwin. Zoning is BRD1, Business Renewal District 1. You'll see that the adjacent parcels are zoned R2 to the east and developed as single-family residential. Properties to the north across Gladwin and the south and the west across Main Street are also zoned BRD1. We have a bird's eye view of the site. Often we find that photos are helpful, and they're helpful during the meeting too, that we're able to go back and forth and refer to some of these things and when questions come up. So this kind of shows sort of looking northeast at the site. And then we have some actual photos that we took from across Main Street of the existing building, the back area. We would note the wall. This is one of the walls, and we'll discuss this in our site plan review, but we did note that there was a portion of that wall that's leaning. It would be something that we would address during the site plan review process. The entry on South Main is recessed with the building abutting the sidewalk, and there's a little flower box, planter box here that's attached to the building as well. We find that having the overall site plan present at the meeting is useful when we have questions. The applicant would like to share information, or the Planning Commission has questions, or members of the public have questions as well. We're able to go back to this slide and illustrate different points that we have there. We also have an illustration from the site plan packet, the elevations that are proposed by the applicant, that you can see a good correlation between what's existing and what's proposed for this building. Here, the new materials proposed are including stone veneer, hardy plank siding, new windows, some EIFS for the cornice material, and metal coping to improve that building there. So we did find some issues in terms of the site plan, some outstanding issues that we would like to see addressed. We know that your team here, the development team, review team, would likely have gotten together before preparing the site plan review and probably before this item came to the Planning Commission, and maybe some of these items would be resolved before we got to the Planning Commission level. We know that it's the city's mission to be as business friendly as possible while still trying to bring sites into better conformity and compliance with the zoning ordinance. So some of the things that we noticed on the site plan, we would like to see the screening of the rooftop units addressed per the ordinance. Address that screen wall repair in that image that I showed with the wall that's tilting in a little bit. We noticed the ground sign was just slightly short for what the requirements are, and that needs to be addressed. Providing the striping from the pedestrian circulation, so from the sidewalk to the front door, and then also demonstrate compliance with the lighting ordinance. So those were things that were missing. In addition, other issues with the site plan, we'd like to see color renderings, as you asked for. To correct the materials, there's some confusion over the labeling of some materials on one of the sheets. Provide better building setbacks. That's really pretty critical information, and that was one of the more important things that we wanted to point out. Labeling all the rooms on the floor plans, that's important for determining parking compliance, and then clearly delineating the parcel boundaries. We noticed on this, there's a little bit of a difference between the site plan and what some of their other data indicates, and the lot description as well, so that needs to be brought together. Additionally, what we would chair with the Planning Commission and encourage discussion on are some of these other more important things, including that places of assembly are a special land use in this district. Now, the place of assembly that's being proposed is replacing a former place of assembly. So it's the same place of assembly, it's just a little bit different kind. Is the change in use sufficient enough to require a new special land use approval? So that would be one of the things that we would want to discuss. Now, this is a religious use being a place of assembly, and so we want to make sure that we're treating this as fairly as possible. In addition, we noticed as we were going through our review that there's an opportunity for the installation of the required front yard green belt along South Main if there were some changes made to the parking lot and the circulation, vehicular circulation on the site, in the north end of the site. And so we would discuss with the Planning Commission if that's something that they would be interested in pursuing with the applicant and make that a requirement of approval. And then just noting that the plan for refuse, they were not planning on having a dumpster, just to go and discuss that with the applicant and make sure that that's sufficient for this site. So our recommendation is to not approve the site plan this evening or at the meeting where we would have discussion until those zoning ordinance compliance issues are addressed. And again, we would like to do those things ahead of time so that when we do get to the Planning Commission, all the information is there and the Planning Commission can make a determination and take action. And so, oops, that's, I guess, the end of that. What I did want to just highlight in our review briefly, because I mentioned the parking lot configuration and the green belt requirement. And if you look on page 3 of your review, down at the bottom of the page, there's a little graphic that we showed that indicates how installing that 10-foot wide green belt there gives an extra opportunity to provide some of the required landscaping on the site, and also changing the direction of those parking spaces on that line from being 90 degree to being slightly angled really improves the circulation there, because we noticed that there was potentially some conflict between some of the two-way travel and the one-way travel with the angle of those parking spaces. And so by incorporating a graphic like this, we try to do that where we can. This was something that we had actually in our graphics library because we illustrate the green belts and the parking configurations. Sometimes it's easier to see that. And when the applicant gets this ahead of time, they have a better understanding about what we would be talking about at the meetings. We also felt it was important to highlight all of these different elements, but including the addressing sustainability. And we have talked about that with you previously. And we noted in your master plan you do have some guidelines or some guidance for incorporating sustainability. These aren't ordinance requirements, but we think that's a good place to start. And so we noted things like this is a reuse of an existing building. That's positive from a sustainability standpoint. That the site has a mix of uses if we included those commercial uses just to the south adjacent to that. The site's already served by public facilities. That's, again, another positive sustainability feature. We noted that the site lacked the tree canopy and some green spaces, but then looking at some of the ways that we might be able to improve that, we think there's some good opportunities to work with the applicant to bring that into better compliance and make that more of a sustainability feature. Pedestrian connections to the neighborhood and the downtown are provided by the sidewalk network, and that's positive. But maybe adding a bike rack could be another opportunity to add another small sustainability feature into this site. We noted, too, that places of worship tend to provide and promote a sense of community. And so those are other things that when we talk about sustainability, we're not just talking about necessarily green building features, but things that make your community well-rounded and provide opportunities for people to have social interactions and feel ties to a community. And then just seeking out other opportunities to use green and recycled materials. These are just things that we would raise with the applicant and share with the Planning Commission to get that dialogue going about how we can continue to incorporate sustainability items. And I think really, and then we included the standards for granting site plan approval, and that would be, again, as we went through this with the Planning Commission, working with them on the information that they feel is the most important and the way that we give that information to them. We want to make sure that it's the easiest for them to understand and makes for an efficient meeting. Did I miss anything that you wanted to add? I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the site plan review or the other information that you asked us to provide as well.
It's just so I understand, the PowerPoint presentation, is that a normal part of your site plan review, or is that
It
for
is.
this evening?
It really depends on the community. We do them in most of our communities. We've started doing them over the last couple of years, just because it's easy we have the plans digitally. It's easy to go back and forth in those things. Back in the old days, we used to have posters that people would bring of the site plan, but it's kind of hard to see. This way, it's nice too, because if you do televise or record, it's there for the public to view and understand. And so we tend to do those for all of our communities now. So yeah, it's working out very nicely, we find.
Appreciate that. The deadline for submission was November 29th. Was the PowerPoint developed after that deadline? It wasn't sent with the
Yes.
other...
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Questions? I did want to talk about the TCO assignment, and what
Yeah.
were your recommendations and thoughts on that issue here in
Yeah, I can
town.
keep going, or if you want to.
Just go ahead.
All right,
We'll
let's grab
chime
my.
in for-
All right.
for the-
I'm gonna roll. Okay, so the format that we put together for you here is similar to a format that we would use for a number of requests of the city or the planning commission when we have an issue. So we'd want to introduce it. We'd say, what are we talking about? We always want to say the current language. So what does the current language say? And then what are the recommendations that we have? So that's how we laid this out. So we did put in here a little bit about what your current zoning ordinance says. You know, we know that you have provisions for the TCO. We also know that you have provisions for performance guarantees. And we know that you have a policy. We weren't able to find the policy on the website, but we did get that later. So we know that there is a policy where the Planning Commission is able to review requests for the TCO, and we understand, from what we understand, you're struggling a little bit to either get compliance or to be able to get that information out. And so we thought of a few things. One is something that's pretty common in most communities, and that's the landscaping or weather-related compliance issues. So we know we've got several site plans that are projects that are under construction now, where all of a sudden the builder's like, well, I can't plan any of the landscaping because everything's going to die or the ground is too frozen. No problem. You just need to put up a bond and we'll take care of that. One of the things that we were thinking of is if we know that we can anticipate some of these things ahead of time, we can let the applicant know and be prepared. And maybe that's even something that the Planning Commission would incorporate into the site plan review, asking the applicant, well, what's your timeline for construction? If it sounds like, we're talking about late winter, asking the Planning Commission then at that time, would you consider granting temporary certificate of occupancy subject to compliance and posting of a bond at a later time, so they don't have to return back? We know, again, talking about being a business-friendly community, if we can minimize the times that people have to come back for things that we can anticipate ahead of time, we would like to try to do that. We also think if there's other commonly reported issues, maybe let's try to look at those. Why is that a common thing that keeps coming up? So if we maybe started in January, we could start tracking what some of these things are. And if we can find some common threads, maybe we can address that. Really, the biggest thing we think would help is, and you probably do this, but more of a routine communication. So communication with the applicant as they're getting close to try to anticipate some of those problems. And then knowing, too, once you have a TCO, it's an 8-month thing, maybe at month 5, where you're reaching out to the applicant and say, oh, hey, you know what, we know you've got a couple months left before your time is up. How's everything going? Is there anything that we can do to help you? We want to make sure that you get compliance by the deadline in 3 months. So at least it's not like, oh, time's up, and now we're struggling because we're not quite finished yet still, or there's something else that needs to be done. So I think communications, looking at those frequently requested items, and maybe some of those could be done administratively, again, making it so that people don't have to come back to the Planning Commission for routine things that always come up, but still keeping that door open for larger issues that maybe do merit Planning Commission consideration. And then trying to be consistent, too, I think is always helpful. Anything else that either of you want to add?
Yeah, the communication part,
You might wanna-
I'll come up here. I think the communication part is really critical, because as Jill mentioned, a lot of times when the TCO is a fairly short window, it can be up to 8 months, sometimes you're trying to get a business open, or you're just opening, you have a lot of things going on, and some things just slip. And I think sometimes it's just an innocent thing, and sometimes it's more intentional. You're always going to have a mixed bag. I think if you're communicating on a regular basis and doing it in a manner that comes across as being business friendly, we're here to help you. It reminds the applicant that they've got a deadline, but in a very friendly way, and lets them ask questions. Okay, I'm having a problem with this, and then maybe someone from the city can actually help them out. The staff can provide direction, which might help with compliance. So those are things that, if you're reminding them that they've got the deadline and you're letting them know there's help somewhere, that there's someone at the city that's willing to help them get to the finish line, then I think you're going to see improved compliance through that communication effort. So.
Are there any other questions?
In regards to the TCO, are there any recommended amendments to our zoning ordinance regarding TCOs, or are you satisfied with it?
We would want to go into a discussion with the Planning Commission and City Council about having a full understanding. I mean, we've read some of your minutes. We've seen we read your ordinance, read your policy. We'd want to have a discussion so we really understand as best we can what the true problems are. I think some of the amendments could potentially tweak those more routine issues like landscaping and other things that you know are going to come up, and making it so that those can be handled in the most efficient way, and then maybe focusing more on the more complex problems and trying to find different approaches. But a lot of this requires us listening to you, because every community is different in the way that these problems present themselves. And so we want to make sure we come up with solutions that you feel comfortable with and fit within your structure here. And it's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's what we're all about. We're all about listening to make sure that whatever solutions we bring forward are based on having that input and having that understanding of your community.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
You too.
So, open this up for discussion.
Item 10, yeah.
Pardon me?
It's the next item.
Which is the discussion
Yeah.
of? Discussion of consideration of the selection of the city planning services firm.
The reason I put that on there was either to discuss to decide tonight, or to discuss to move it to decide next week. That was more of a kind of a
Open-ended.
open-ended.
I think the presentations were great. I'd like I'd like to be able to send this to the Planning Commission with the packets we received, and have them add it to their Tuesday agenda and just discuss. Not that I'm not necessarily looking for a recommendation from them, but just to see their process and what was good and bad from the presentations and from the site plans. And then, I would like to then watch their Planning Commission meeting and base my decision on some of their discussion.
I think that's a fair process.
Yeah, we have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission in, 16 days? I don't know if we put this off until after then. That would be after our next council meeting.
That means we wouldn't be making a decision until January.
Correct.
I think
I
that,
don't know if that's fair, but
Well, and that's, it may be clear based on their discussions on what firm that they are. I'd feel comfortable letting them have an opportunity to look at these, review these, debate them during their next Plan Commission meeting, and then determining if we can add it to the agenda, or maybe we just add it to the next city council meeting and determine if we can vote at that time. If not, we can certainly then postpone that decision after our future meeting with the Planning Commission, and maybe there's further discussion during that evening.
Yeah.
If that is what we do, we would definitely need to send them this documentation that's been provided to us.
Oh, absolutely.
These responses.
I'd like the whole packet to go to them as part of their agenda and I did speak to the Planning Commission Chair in regard to that specific request, and at this time, didn't believe that there was too much on their agenda to be able to add this particular item.
I mean, I think it's a little unfair that they haven't had the opportunity to, I mean, they were able to attend the public meeting and ask questions via written card. They weren't able to ask any questions this evening, but based on the information that we can provide them, I'd be interested in their input.
And then also, Jim Albus wrote the questions, Jim and Susie wrote it, right? The questions and what we were looking for, so we'd be looking for some input from them as well, correct? Speaking of which.
If you didn't like the questions, I wrote everything. If you liked them, it was a team effort. So, yeah, I pretty much put them together. I didn't know if you wanted input from other people. I just had I put together what you had said on the last council meeting, and I did leave things off of that site plan. You know, I just submitted the plans, I didn't submit the application and stuff. So that's what a lot of the things that were brought up were intentionally not sent to them, because I didn't want to have a completed site plan that they'd say is all cleared, so.
It was nice to be able to compare apples to apples, so thank you, appreciate that.
So did you have thoughts on the presentation you wanted to share? I mean, you asked the questions, did they answer them the way you wanted them to?
I thought the two different versions on the TCO, they both brought up salient points that we should address. The site plans, both presentations, I like the written presentation of Beckett Rader. I like the visual presentation of Giffords Webster, the verbal
If
presentation.
you had to rank them, is there one you liked better than the other, or you liked them both the same?
Well, I'm leaning towards Giffords myself, so.
Based on,
Based on the previous presentation, the presentation tonight, the cost breakdown on what they're offering, services they offer, and their location being closer to us. So there's, Susie's here, so if you want to ask her the same questions, that would, because I think she has a different opinion than mine. So.
She was sequestered.
I wanted to keep it a surprise. Yay. What can I help you with?
we were just asking, Jim having had, and you prepared the questions in conjunction with him, correct? We were just asking the, extent to which they answered the questions. Were you getting the answers you expected? And based on the responses, was there one that you would rank higher than the other? Those sorts of things.
I anticipated the answers to Matt's questions of them, like what amendments would you make to the TCO policy? I mean, I'm not surprised that they both said, we would like to really hear what problems you're facing, and have a more thoughtful discussion about it. So that part, I get. I think that the response by Giffords Webster was more thought out, especially as it relates to the TCOs. I mean, I can certainly appreciate what Mr. Tellerico was saying. They shouldn't be doled out. And this was a conversation that we had ad nauseum at Planning Commission. And so, I can see both sides of those. I like the thought outness of the Giffords response for that. Trainings, I think both of them are comparable. Mr. Tellerico is a professor. Giffords Webster is known for going out and doing trainings and participating in those, planning conferences and seminars and discussions. And so I think that from an educational standpoint, I think we're going to get solid presentations and solid information from both of them. And in terms of their site plan reviews, I did notice some differences in the styles and in some of the things that they caught and didn't catch or recommended. I think that, I don't know if I have a hard, like, definitely these guys or definitely these guys. I do think that the closeness of Giffords, proximity-wise to the city, it is an asset. Beckett and Reader's coming from Ann Arbor, which is thereabouts the same area that McKenna's traveling from. It takes them a long time. And I'm not a fan of commuting, so I would hate to, put that same kind of strenuous onus on others if it's not necessary. But I do think that because Giffords Webster has worked with the community, specifically with the DDA and their downtown plan and the zoning ordinance changes, they were very proactive in trying to address a lot of the issues that that Planning Commission and Council had brought up during those plans, and they learned what they kept what they learned in the master planning process, and they carried that through when they were making zoning ordinance recommendations. I like the way that the downtown zoning ordinance is currently formatted. So I do, it is easier, so I guess I kind of lean a little bit towards them, but I think we're going to get fabulous planners, regardless of whether or not we go with Beckett and Rader, or if we go with Giffords Webster. I think that they're, Giffords has got, I think that they're good, they're very well-rounded, and they've got a nice calm energy, which I think is, it's the yin to my yang. I think that, Beckett and Reader also they've got a lot of energy. And so, but either way, I think we're going to get great firms.
Thinking of the businesses or developers that come to us for reviews, which firm do you think would be most compatible with the businesses that come to us?
I would have to say Giffords. I mean, like I said, I think they've got a nice, which isn't to say that Mr. Tellerico and the rest of his staff don't. I think that the Giffords Webster team is overall, like I said, very calming. I think they can explain things in a way that don't make people feel somehow unreasonably unknowledgeable about something, and really offer some good solutions that will be received well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone? All right.
Anyone else?
Cool.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion?
Do we need some sort of resolution to send anything to Planning Commission, or do we?
If you want to send it to planning, you should have a resolution. It should outline exactly what you want them to do and when you want them to report back to you.
I'm not looking for a report back recommendation from them.
I'm not
looking
saying
for
a
them to have
recommendation,
discussion.
just on the observations regarding the presentation. If you don't want them, then just refer it to the Planning Commission. But
I don't know why we wouldn't ask for a recommendation if we were going to send.
that's true. Or have it more substantive as far as what might have been lacking that you look forward to as a body.
So are you looking more for a summation of their opinions versus a recommendation? So if we were to word it that way, would you be more comfortable with it?
Yes,
I mean, there's no question you make the ultimate decision.
correct. And I want to make sure, I mean, I want their opinion to, I mean, I want to be able to see the discussion and debate that body does. And based on that debate and discussion, I'd like to make my decision. So it's more the conversation that they have and the things that they bring up that I would like to watch to help me make my decision.
Well,
Which it may be clearly based on their discussion on how they're leaning one way or the other. I just don't want to change their role to say, we're looking for you to give us a recommendation, because I don't think that's fair in the long run.
I agree with that. I think part of the examination is to try to figure out what makes one group more unique than the other. And that depends on the nature of the text of the questions that are asked by the members of the Planning Commission to that body that deal with a number of things about experience, uniqueness, imagination, challenges that they think might occur in the future vis-a-vis Clawson, given what they know about it. Or along those lines. That doesn't give you an input as far as who's favored. It gives you an input of how detailed they are and how expansive they are in the base of information to prepare for challenges that come about.
So if we were to say, Madam Mayor, I move that we direct the administration to send all of the information that was presented today by the two planning committees and all the attachments to the Planning Commission for purposes of it being discussed at their next regularly scheduled meeting, and then make the request that they give us a summation of their opinions at the conclusion of that meeting.
Support?
Did you support it, or are you asking for support?
I did. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Aris,
Yes.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley.
Yes. And the motion carries. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a consideration of the conditional approval of a contract with GovTemp USA for the appointment of an interim city manager. I did want to add a little bit of information in regard to Mr. Haberman. I did reach out and speak to four of the commissioners from Adrian, and all of them were very happy with his services. They all independently mentioned that he hit the ground running and he checked all the boxes. He found things to share with the council, or the commissioners, that they hadn't seen before, so he addressed pension liabilities. He was quick to respond to all issues within city staff and residents. He brought grants to the table, great ideas, and consistently was a breath of fresh air, was what they had all mentioned. That he was very knowledgeable, and without reservation, he was great to fill the gaps, and a host of other items. There was additionally some questions regarding his, when I talked to the GovHR people, there was a conversation that he'd mentioned, there was some concern on day-to-day finances. I followed up with Mr. Haberman to find out exactly what he meant with those concerns. And he was talking about day-to-day, making sure that our monthly obligations were taken care of, FICA, any normal reporting that needed to be done. But he was not aware that we had a current part-time bookkeeper on staff. Once I mentioned that to him, he felt that his concerns were addressed in regard to an additional help with finances. I did then contact our bookkeeper, who's been with us for a number of years, and she's stepped up to really help us. And I'd asked her if she was willing to do that for the next 12 weeks to be able to do a little bit more work, and she had no problem doing with that, and sounds like she's doing a great job. She isn't just a bookkeeper, but she's, for many years, been the one responsible for moving the money, making sure that our FSA monies were there, making sure all the bills are paid, the right general ledger accounts are done, and numerous reporting. So she's been in the trenches with the city for a number of years and doing a great job from everything I can say. So I just wanted to share that information. And one other item was that it was not brought to our attention that Mr. Haberman physically only wants to be in the office 3 days a week, and for one day a week, or that fourth day to be working from home available, but wouldn't on a regular basis be here 4 days a week, but would attend and be here if needed, but always available for email and to come into the office if needed. But he would like the opportunity to be at home 3 days a week, or be here 3 days a week. He says that he's found that that works best from a cost benefit to the city, and as he mentioned during his interview, his wife had recently had surgery, and he wants to be able to help take care of her the Monday and Friday. So I wanted to share that additional information with council and the public.
Do we have an idea of what specific duties he would be doing, and could they be accomplished from home?
When I talked to him about what duties he was talking about, he said he can respond to email, available for staff, mentioned directors specifically. He can do that. He was talking about doing those financial analysis items from home. As most of us are able to work from home, he's said he's fine doing work from home and financial analysis and those sort of things.
So he would try and shift his duties such that anything that's more of a solitary sort of activity is what he does at home, and make himself very, very available the other 3 days.
Correct. So it wasn't so much the hours, it was just the physical presence. And that was information I was not aware of when he came in, so.
And so the regular scheduled time they put in for the 3 days is 8 hours, 9 hours? I guess I work from home sometimes too. And I know that, when I'm in the office, I have to look busy. And when I'm at home, hopefully my boss isn't watching, I do my wash, right? And so, because it's hard to stay as focused at home as it is when you're in the office. And so I have concerns about getting the bang for our buck when he's working from home. And I know we're all professionals, and probably if you take out, talking to my friend Adam and getting goldfish from the snack bar at work, it whittles down to the same amount of time as I would at home. I have concerns about paying a contractor an hourly rate working from home is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and I guess maybe that's a discussion council has on these are the tasks that we want to, that we address that.
I know when I work from home, I can slam out twice as much as I would during the day at the office. Easily, no distractions. I control what I do, how I do it. I know and that includes doing laundry and unloading the dishwasher. I can do more at home than I can without just the constant interruption of someone trying to redirect you during the day. But that's someone who, you just have to have that discipline. And if we're now looking at someone who's only willing to be here 3 days a week, are we interested in looking at the gentleman who's only interested in being here 2 days a week and making it more competitive? Because he had some good skills as well. And I don't think I've seen anything on finances to know exactly what this is going to cost us yet. And I could be wrong, but I didn't see it.
I think I sent it.
Okay, just
I think I
didn't see it
sent the
today. then.
contract. That Mr. Kingsept went over the contract and
Yes, I
was
did see
going
it.
to make some
Grouped in, yeah.
Right.
changes. Other discussion?
So I actually spoke with Mr. Lamorato, the other, another man who had submitted his resume, and I asked him if he would be willing to consider 3 days per week, and he considered it for about a day and contacted me and said he would not. So for me, 2 days per week is. If he were willing to consider 3 days per week, for me, that would have been sufficient. So that's not a deal breaker to me, but I don't know, 2 days per week, I'm not sure that that's the guidance we need.
When
My
Mr.
concern is all finance. Make sure, we got to get somebody in there right away and get the finance stuff done. You know, city manager stuff can wait, as far as I'm concerned. Just get a good person doing the financials in there, and the city basically can run by itself.
What finances are you concerned about specifically?
Just everything in general that has to be done from the city level.
The audits, the year end, I mean, that's the most important thing to stay on top of. I hate to
Exactly.
give Mike more responsibility, but Mike has a lot of balls in the air here and pretty much juggles a lot of things. And I know you guys know managers are very important to an organization in directing how everything flows, but most managers can be absent and not, and if they set things up correctly, you don't miss a beat. And I agree with Howie on that.
Well, it's like, Chris is already doing those things. That's why I was asking what specifically. I mean, she's moves money around based on Mike Smith's FSA and HSA calculations from the benefit standpoint. She's already doing the audits. She's the one that knows what general ledger account everything gets posted to. People are calling her to confirm what general ledger account things got posted to. The treasurer's office is the one that's actually keys in all the bills per month. I did talk to Chris and find out if we have things keyed in and that they're just automatically spit out, like, you know, like your mortgages, does it just automatically get paid? That process has not been set up here, so that the treasurer's department actually does key them in, and they've been doing that. The questions that Chris has been getting is in regard to what specific general ledger account that they need to be put to. Because Chris has been doing it for a while, she's just referring to all the accounts and how they've been posted in the past. So I'd asked her, those were the type of questions. I said, where are your concerns? And so her concern was grant things that are going to come down the pipe, that to have a city manager person that knows how some of those, she said she's never done a bond and some of those payments. She said that's a city manager role, that a city manager would need to help her know how to do those. She said there's a chemical bank bill due, which is, I believe, our large equipment purchases last year, and so those bills she expects December, January, and she said that she'd need to have a city manager possibly direct her on where those go, because there may or may not be the templates in the past to be able to know where those should go.
Would Harry know about that?
Know about what?
Drink one? Well, where all the payments and all stuff go?
No, I mean, that's an accounting function on, I mean, it's essentially what the budget is based on. I did talk to Rich regarding the new budget. He talked a little bit about that he's going to probably want to start, you know, if he were coming on board, he'd want to start looking at those. I did mention we, you know, have the previous year's ones available, as well as the 5-year Excel document that would be a starting point to share. That's available.
I understand council members' desires to get somebody in who can work on finances. Is this body going to find that person and hire them and conduct interviews? I just don't think that's practical, frankly. It's my opinion we should hire a city manager and let him or her manage the city, and hire a finance person as necessary. Mr. Haberman seemed confident that he could provide a lot of financial services to the city with aid of some, perhaps some outside firm, but it sounds like Chris, as our bookkeeper, might be able to provide that for him as well.
Well, any further discussion, or do we have a motion?
I do want to understand the language in the motion as it is presented to us. We talk about the conditional approval of a contract, and what is the conditional approval of the contract?
Well, the Kingcep's deletions are accepted. I reviewed the contract. There's some provisions in there, and then indemnification clause, which we never agreed to. There is provisions in there that the state of law is out of, in one reference, Wisconsin, in the other, Cook County Court. We certainly are not going to go to that venue, so that's out. There's some rewording of some other language. The substance of the documentation is retained because it deals with the duties and responsibilities, the payment provisions, and so forth. I don't think it's something that's going to be complex, but those details have to be resolved.
Mr. Kingsepp, by your understanding of law, can this contract be made public?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Once it's executed.
Madam Mayor, I move the conditional approval of a contract with GovTemps USA for the appointment of Richard Haberman as the interim city manager for the city of Clawson be approved.
I can support, I did before. Support. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Milan,
No.
Councilmember Moffett,
No.
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley,
Yes.
excuse me, Councilmember Ayers.
Ah, boy. We need somebody in here. We gotta have. Go with Rich. I mean, at least I know what he can do. Yes.
And the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Mr. Kingsepp, will you finish working with them on that contract items?
Yep.
And this is to the public, once that has been executed, we will have it available to the public on the website and
Right.
in other venues. The next item on the agenda is consideration of a resolution directing administration to draft an RFP for a city manager search. Mr. Kingsepp, I see that you're available for questions on this.
Right, I think you need to get on that as soon as possible. There are resources you can deal with in recent cities, which they've gone through a number of things that we might be able to transport from the standpoint of detail. But I think you need to begin working on that. I think Mike and I would be able to do that and then get it to you, but it's a process that starts as soon as possible. It's critical because you're going to be getting into issues regarding how that's going to be posted. If you're going to get an organization to work through, there's that as well. Then you're going to get the resumes and then begin going through the resumes as you get them. And you're going to have to discuss whether you want outside assistance for that purpose as well. Having gone through that process, assistance helps you in getting background information that in a quick manner, so you have all the background detail, and also beginning to assist you in looking at who might be a first tier, who might be a second tier for interviews. So figure it can take about 4 months.
Let me, I was under the impression that our RFP was going to be looking for an executive search organization, not for us to do a city manager search.
That's fine, and then do that. But I think you want to have some real input, though, into, well, you can do that. Do that if it's for an executive search and have those searches received by you, and then you determine what you're going to do.
Right.
That there's a lot on that from the standpoint of expense. You want to be prudent. You don't want to be foolish, but you want to be prudent and thorough and exert the leverage you do have in hiring someone, because you do have leverage in hiring. So that's going to be important, but that should be done as soon as possible.
We had talked about that at the last meeting that we had. I thought in hopes of being able to post someone sooner or something sooner than later. And so, I mean, we talked about the RFP not being very detailed, just, hey, folks, we need to do a search, please send us your information. And then based on that, we could make a decision about how we're going to move forward. But I mean, I would hate to have to write the RFP and then not post it until the 18th and then not be able to look at it to the beginning of December, especially in light of the fact that Mr. Haberman's only agreed to be on board until the middle of March. So we've got a real tight timeline. What is the quickest path to be able to get something posted so that that by our next meeting on the 18th, we could be looking at the people that have responded and be picking a search firm and a path forward by the 18th?
See, I don't know that we're going to be able to get enough back at that time, but I think the January meeting, you should be able to have your packet of respondents to the RFP available to review in January. I don't know how you'd, even if you could get it written and posted this week, you still have to give a little bit of time, and that would put us past that.
So if we're not going to pick a firm until the beginning of January, and then we would need to, so we wouldn't have them fully engaged in working on it until the second meeting in January, right? March. We have until March, January, February, March. We have 3 months.
But we talked about during that time that we need to get our clear and concise agreement on what we're looking for, the job description and all that information. And so I think that we're going to need a little bit of time to do that as well. So hopefully, mid-January, you get all those things are ready to go. And
so given it's about a 10-week timeline once we engage someone, that means that we would, in the middle of March, based on that, we would have another absence. We would have, and then even if in 10 weeks we decide, we pick someone, we engage them, they could be employed and need to give 2 weeks' notice or need to move. So by waiting until January to be able to actively start our search process, we are setting ourselves up for having a period of time with no one at the helm again.
Well, there's one other thing to inject in that as well, because Mike and I are going to be very busy with FOIA requests. We have 6 of them, and some of them are very imaginative. these FOIA requests are going to be responded very differently than in the past because of the nature of the content that's sought. So,
I'm, that aside, I'm not sure, so last Tuesday, at our workshop, our council meeting, we did approve a resolution to direct city administration to draft an RFP for a city manager executive firm, or executive search firm. Was that insufficient?
When I spoke to you, I said that it wasn't clear. I think even when we look back on it, that the language wasn't as clear as because what did you want? From what Victoria had spoken to me about was that, did you really want a 1-page or the RFPs that were like 8 or 10 pages? So it was kind of, I think it wasn't clear. And when I talked to city attorney, he said to put it on this agenda to clarify some of those things that you're actually looking for. Do you want a very clear, just one paragraph or something, or are you looking for more details?
I think we're looking for an organization that does executive searches. I mean, I don't think it needs to be an 8-page detailed, we're looking for, if it's a page, great. If it's, clear, concise, and get it out there so that we can, give 2 weeks for people to respond.
okay. I think we can work on that in the remaining days of this month to try to get you something in January.
Well, I think, too, that we as a body need to be prepared, and we already have, but have special workshops or meetings during this time. And if that means that we have to have a meeting to discuss the RFP so we can get it out there more quickly, I think that we should be prepared to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to wait till the end of December or January to get this RFP written. I mean, I'm talking about a paragraph.
Right.
I think that city staff is very
I can write
qualified.
it tomorrow. That's fine.
That would be excellent.
So
Thank
then
you very
could we
much.
have a quick meeting later this week to review what he writes and potentially approve it, an open meeting to approve it, and then so we could get it posted sooner? Get it disseminated sooner?
Yes, please.
Do you need to have a meeting to approve
That's
the
a
language?
question for Mr. Kingsept and you.
I think you might want to do that.
Because you only, as a special meeting, you only need 18 hours, so you'd have to, for the posting. So if we did it tomorrow, Wednesday, if you had the meeting Thursday, I guess, that would have, be in that time. That's what you mean.
Just to be clear, that 18 hours is a state law, correct?
Yes.
So
This
do we
would
need
fall
a
under
motion
that
for
because it is a special meeting.
So, Madam Mayor, I move that we direct city staff to prepare a draft of an RFP for discussion at a special open meeting to be held on Thursday, December 7th.
6th.
6th. Does that work?
Fine.
Is it support? Is that clear
Yes.
enough? Okay, all right. I'm not being smart. I just want to, I
Oh,
want to
please.
confirm.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Olbrich?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
And the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is consideration of approving the 2019 schedule of public meetings for city boards and commissions. And it's a requirement of the Michigan Open Meetings Act for the governing body to annually adopt a meeting schedule for all boards and commissions, which comes under the act. It's recommended that the schedule be approved, posted on the City Hall bulletin boards, and published in the Daily Tribune. Essentially, the meetings are remaining the same, where city council meetings are the first and third Tuesday of every month, the library board, the second Tuesday of every month, city planning commission, second and fourth Tuesday of every month, downtown development authority, third Wednesday of every month, the historical commission, second Tuesday of January, April, July, and October, Parks and Recreation Board is the second Monday of every month except for July and December. Traffic and Safety Board is the first Thursday of every month. The Zoning Board of Appeals, the third Thursday of every month.
Madam Mayor, I move the 2019 schedule of public meetings for the city of Clawson, boards and commissions be approved, posted on the city hall bulletin board, and published in a daily Tribune.
Support?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Harris?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is consideration of the list of bills as presented.
Madam Mayor, pay the bills.
Support.
Roll call, please.
All right. Mayor Woolley?
Yes.
Councilmember Harris?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
And the bill's going to be paid. City Attorney's Report.
A couple of reports. Chickens will be on your next agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Not an ordinance. I've done a memo, and it's going to be vetted by someone who volunteered, who was at one of these meetings, who has a degree and so forth. Because I think you need to be challenged on really what you want. And the ordinance is simple if you determine the specifics of what you want. And I'm talking about basically chickens, no other barn animals. And I've read a lot on it since being given a lot of information. I felt better for you to have the report and then make the decision on the type of ordinance you want, because then it's going to be easy to do the ordinance. I'm not going to do the ordinances done by the other cities based on the information that I've gleaned. I think you can be more specific and detailed in connection with that if you want to go forward. And we'll have the options in there. Then it's for your call on the ordinance or not. But the information is going to be background information that you have that's complete for that. And I might even suggest what ought to be in the ordinance. But I want you to get through the background information once the individual who's got the degree in this area vets it and adds to it. So there's that. We've received a number of FOIA requests. As I said, they're very imaginative. There definitely will be objections to some of them. When we get FOIA requests of this, I'm not saying all of them, but 3 or 4 of them are very comprehensive. And in that context, generally the format is to ask always for an extension of time, which we do on the first request, and that gets us an additional 10 business days. And then we send a letter out, and we will in these instances, saying that we are in the process of developing the information, and here's a fee that we're seeking in advance for that preparation. Because what's going to happen on those is there's a great effort to collect the information because they're requesting emails from each council member. And so we're going through that process, and you have to collate that. And what you do when you're responding to it, you begin to document every single item that might be pertinent to the request. And when you do that and furnish it, the pages are bait stamped, and then you compile the documents you want to copy, privileged or not, and then you identify in the text of the documentation that's being collated blank pages, and you say it's blank because it's a protected document or it's privileged or whatever. But at least you have the list then of the format that's being done. It takes time to prepare all that. And like I say, they're asking for a lot. So some of them it's like an interrogatory, and those are what I'm going to object to because you don't have to be restricted by a description that you're required to answer. You are to produce documents that you have that are relevant, not in accordance with a description or a requirement, because there are a number of protections that you have as a public body to exercise a privilege. And it's different than what's stated in the act. the act says, what you have to do to produce documents and what, but it also relies upon other statutes that allow the right to withhold documents. And so those other statutes that come into play. So you'll see what I mean when I build everything up, but it's going to be comprehensive. So Mike and I will be involved on that. We're going to meet probably tomorrow to do the RFP and then delve into the FOIA request. So you'll be getting an email from me with the scanned FOIA requests that I've received and with the instructions that will be followed. Naturally, that's an attorney-client privilege document, but it will disclose the process and the format and the legal advice on why I'm acting as I am, because now you're doing a record on everything in case there's a challenge in court on the response to the FOIA request. So that's what it is, and some of them are contention questions, which is foreign to a FOIA request. And so, those you can either ignore or you can provide, I interpret that as the following. And there will be that in there, and you have a right to do that, because some of them are general enough, and you can say, I'm interpreting your request to apply to A, B, C, D, and E, period. And that gives you the latitude to do it. So it's going to be a long process, and that's 6 now that are filed. I'm sure we'll get some more this week.
Anything else?
Let's see, yes. There's a group of South Oakland lawyers that have met over a period of 4, 5, maybe 6 years, and we gather to head knock. We did it on the August flood, and we've done it on other things. We're having a meeting on the 20th or 21st of this group, and we're going to talk about the marijuana bill. There are a lot of issues and a lot of misconceptions that are going to come out that when December 6th comes up, boy, it's all out there. We can grab it, run it, and smoke it, and do whatever we want to with it. But it's not. The state is determining. We're doing regulations. It will take us until 2020 to complete those regulations. That's their public announcement. The rhetorical question is, why does it take that long when you were doing regulations on the other bill that you adopted, the legislature adopted? Why can't you use some of those? But it's going to be a problem. So we have a discussion on that because everyone's going to head knock. Basically, most of the Oakland County communities are not going into the marijuana business, at least right now. That can always change, but for the past 2 or 3 years, we're not interested. So there's that. There are going to be Airbnb discussions as well as a topic because some communities are facing problems with that. So we're going to head knock and see what we can anticipate or expect in the future and what type of legislation is going to have to be done. There are a couple of other items on the agenda as well, but it's always a good group to exchange information and ideas and go forward. So that's where we are.
Thank you.
Mr. Kingsup, to quote you, we need to put pressure on lawyers. So I'm pretty frustrated with the chicken ordinance and its lack of progression. So we suspended enforcement of the chicken ordinance for 90 days. Do you know when that 90 days is up?
I think it's probably up now.
It's up the day before our next council meeting.
Is it?
So,
Okay.
So now we're forced into a situation where...
well, if you want, I can do the ordinance, but I don't want to guess what your thoughts may be.
Right.
Because I don't know which way you're going.
No, and a draft ordinance prior to the day after the expiration would have been probably the better way to go there.
I apologize.
And then for several months, there's been an outstanding item about traffic and safety board amendments.
Yeah, and I had indicated a while ago that we were deferring that because of all that was going on, and I announced it would be on at the next meeting. The standard would and the traffic and safety board ordinances.
At which next meeting?
This month.
Okay, December 18th.
Yeah, I had indicated that before.
Sorry. Maybe missed that or forgot it. That's all I had. Thank you.
So to Matt's point about the 90-day extension expiring the day before our next meeting, do we, in lieu of having an ordinance in place, do we vote at the next meeting to extend the?
You can vote to extend it. I mean, it's not going to be harmful. It'll be 30 days because you're going to have the ordinance either then or shortly thereafter.
Why don't we do it now?
If
Extend
you
it
want
now.
to do it, that's your call.
Wouldn't that be a lot easier?
Can we be so
Probably,
ambiguous
it's your
as to
call.
say that we want to extend it until such place as a permanent ordinance is put in
Your
place?
call.
Yes. That makes more sense.
Well, let's do that.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor,
You're up.
I move that we extend the suspension of enforcement of the current barnyard animals ordinance until such time as a rewritten ordinance is put in place. You don't like that?
Because you want to put pressure on the lawyer, remember. So
Oh.
you say 30 days from the date of termination or 40 days from this date.
We got Matt. He remembers everything.
Oh, apparently not. Apparently not.
I want to leave the concerns of the citizens. We'll put pressure on you, trust me. But I want to leave the citizens' concerns about if they're going to, I want them to know that they're safe until we do our work and get the ordinance put in place. And so I prefer to put the onus on us for putting the pressure on you to get the ordinance wrapped up versus having them be concerned.
Sure.
Support, Mr. Ayers?
Well, what I'm going to do, I'll probably do this, is incorporate, based upon the concern about the delay, what I'll do is ask the person who's assisting me to provide some suggestions on the type of ordinance, and then incorporate that. Now, why do I say this? When I looked at the ordinances, based on the information I read and looked again at the ordinance, I mean, they were really superficial, and they didn't go into the detail that highlights some of the hygienic aspects of chickens, maintenance, and diseases that can occur, proper care and treatment, and so forth, because I was framing the ordinance in the context of developing, and I have not discussed this with administration, developing the report and then developing the ordinance in a succinct format, but requiring the process for the licensing to be a little more comprehensive on an information standpoint. So you know that the areas of concern on hygienics and disease and maintenance and so forth are known by the individual, are reported, they have a process in place and so forth. I don't see any of that in the ordinances that I've developed. I've seen a lot in the writings that is a concern, but I haven't seen it in the ordinance. So that's where I was coming from on this whole thing.
All right, so you're asking for what, 30 days after?
30 days after.
A 30-day,
45 days.
45
Well, I
days?
said that and then 30. It's up, your call.
I like the 45-day, that, because we've got a lot of stuff you're doing right now.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
You go with that? 45?
45 days?
So do I need to restate the motion move my other motion, make a new motion?
Mr. Smith?
You can
have a
restate it.
motion
You were the one who did the motion, so you can.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to revise the motion to set a limit of 45 days for the extension on the premise that the ordinance will be in place at that time.
I was trying to look and see what 45 days was.
Support?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Milan?
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett?
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Woolley?
Yes. The next item on the agenda is city manager's report.
Madam Mayor, members of council, the only thing I have to report was that I was notified by Matt Hodges of the DPW that the leaf season was complete November 29th as scheduled, and they are converting their trucks to salt. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much.
I have a question relative to that, sorry, but, sorry. I noticed in driving around that there are some people who were not aware of that and have raked their leaves into the street. So do they just stay there until they blow away, or is there a letter sent to those people, or what do we do about the leaves that are in the street?
I will look into that and let you know. I'm not sure what the protocol is on that, but I will talk with Matt and see, because I'm sure that's happened in the past.
Sure.
So we'll see how that was handled, and we'll deal with it on that basis.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you, Chief, for taking over these responsibilities that you didn't ask for, but I'm sure you're very amply handling, and we appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
I second that. City Clerk's report.
Madam Mayor and Council, I do have a few items. With all these other items that we have, I do want to still schedule that meeting at Renshaw, Mr. Kingsap. Hopefully the 17th or the 19th might work. We'll figure that out tomorrow when we meet. And post the notice to the residents to discuss everything that goes on at Renshaw and suggestions and all of that stuff for development. We do have one for sure person who who's come in, and he has stated he does want to live in the apartments. So we will for sure have one less, I guess, vacancy. The other one still, we don't have enough, so we're moving on to our secondary list, which is people outside of the city. We've exhausted the list of those that were inside the city. We always go to that list first, and then we go to the ones outside. So we anticipate that most likely we will get them filled, but we'll see where we're at with that. We will be mailing out notices for the public hearing for the Class C liquor licenses at that wonderful meeting before that takes place in January, which will be on a Wednesday, of course, because of the new year. We'll be doing that at the end of this week. I was contacted by the Clawson School District, if anyone else was aware. Kind of gave me a little sadness, but that's okay. They approved a millage to be placed for a special May election. So we will be incurring that cost, so I will have to be reimbursed because that is a special one. So every single thing that we do, we've talked to the county about that. So it is, because it is not a planned election in my budget. So I tried to talk them into an August or a November one, especially November, since we have a November election, but they were adamant for a May one. So we'll go forward with that, and that's how we do it. So that will be on the agenda for, I believe, for a non-homestead millage or renewal or something like that. So I don't know the exact language. And then just a friendly reminder, I'll say it next week as well, City Hall offices, of course not the police department because they're 24/7, will be closed on December 24th and 25th and December 31st and January 1st. The reason that shows some implications, of course, is because taxes, people want to pay them before, so they're going to be short in those weeks. And with that, winter taxes were mailed out, so that's why I like to reiterate that a couple times, because it's short times and you can put the payments in the drop box, but if you do it in one of those days, it's not if people want to claim it on their taxes during that year, we won't put it in until January 2nd, so you're not going to be able to get that if you put it in during that time frame. So you can come in and the treasurer's office is here. It's been pretty steady lately with the taxes, so just wanted to remind that we do have the drop box where you can pay online as well. So that is out, and actually the dog licenses are here. They came early. So Oakland County said this is the first time I think they brought them to us a couple weeks early. So we've already had some residents come in to get their 2019 tags. So they are here. That's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. Smith?
Madam Mayor, if I could say something about Mike. I appreciate everything he did during his vacation, supposedly. That he was there answering all the questions that had to be answered, and we appreciate employees like that will go right to the wall for you. Thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Any unfinished business? Any new business?
The only, sorry. I don't know where this belongs, but we had, last week, we had read some specific commissions that have appointments that are expiring. And I think we talked about having those posted somewhere. I didn't see that being posted. If we could just make sure that those get posted.
Sure. I sent it to the mayor, but I'll post it
got
as
it.
well.
Yeah, just want to make sure we publicize that so people who are interested can apply.
I can get
We
that.
accept
I can have
applications
Victoria.
all year long.
And I did look in the minutes from last time, and it didn't, I was gonna, but I didn't see it. But that's true. Okay, never mind, I'm done.
And then I wanted to say that SACRA's website says that yard waste is collected until the 3rd week of December.
Put it in the bag.
Madam Mayor,
Nope.
public discussion.
Public discussion. The floor is now open. Come to the mic and state your name and address, please.
Good evening, Travis Cochran, 1213 Shenandoah Drive, Clawson, Michigan. Two things I wanted to bring up. Since the chicken ordinance was brought up, I wasn't available when that meeting occurred, so I sent an email. As someone in giving reference, I grew up in a rural area. My parents' neighbors have horses, people have chickens. It's a lot of space there. My parents have 40 acres. The farm across the street's 120. My lot's 50 feet wide. Having someone with a barnyard animal next to me would be a imposition on me. It's not something I want to live by. And the ramifications of my property value alone. The next person saying, a chicken? Why do I don't want that. So in your consideration for this, don't think of it just as allowing someone to have a pet. It should be thought of as a whole and how it impacts everyone. So I would ask for that consideration. Second, with the dismissal of the city manager, I'm a little concerned about what's happening. I've been out of town on business, and I pick up the paper and I read that Mark's been dismissed. Someone that's always been professional, courteous, responsive to my needs as a citizen. And then I'm sitting here listening, and there's concern, and what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Obviously, this wasn't thought out. If it was Machiavellian, you would have had a director of finance in place and then fired him. So I don't expect a response. I don't want anything to jeopardize what is in place with agreements or what could happen. But I do have a concern. We've moved so far from when I moved in here in 2003 to where we are today that actions and what's demonstrated has ramifications. And this better be handled right. I'm not in agreement, but you're the stewards, and you have to do this correctly. And get the right person in here and drop any of this, what appears to me as petty, because it sends the wrong message to the staff that's here. So what I would say is, and I'm a little upset about this, watch what you're doing, because I'm watching, and everyone is watching. So be careful in what you do. But more importantly, no one wants chickens. And the people that do, I understand, but I don't want it next to me. So have a good evening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Stephanie Georges, 38 West Tacoma. I'm not sure if this is the right place to bring this up, but I'm here, so why not? I currently have a utility pole that is in the easement between my sidewalk and Tacoma, my street. And it's been there for what seems like at least a couple of months. It did hinder my ability to get the leaves to the street. and I have quite a few leaves on my property. In addition, I'm worried about when it starts to snow and it gets covered and the grass underneath it. I mean, things like that kill the ground. So I don't know if anyone can tell me why it's there, what the plan is, how long it's going to be there, if it's going to be addressed, removed, or whatnot. But it's just kind of an eyesore right now, being in front of my house. So if anybody has any information on that, I would like to know more about that. Thank you.
I'll see if I can call our contact at DTE and see if he's got any answers on resolution to that.
It's been there for quite a while.
Is it power or does it have?
I think it's Edison.
Laying flat on the easement.
Oh,
Yeah, she
I
says
gotcha.
just a
Okay.
pole.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really struggled to get my leaves out.
Because I know sometimes there's the right of way for the cellular things. I didn't know if it was that kind of stuff. So
I'll see if DTA can shed any light on that.
Yeah, I don't know whose it is. It just
Yeah.
appeared one day and hasn't moved since.
It's yours.
We tried moving it, but it got moved right back, so someone's watching it.
Really? Anyone else?
Michael Frink, 1333 North Selfridge. Just want to add some clarification to something Mr. Smith said about the school board request for an election. The reason we're requesting the May election is our budget year is July 1st through July 30th. The reason for this is we have the way the state funds the schools, there is a portion that we're required to acquire through a non-homestead tax in our district, and because of Headley, we are unable to request the full amount, and it is jeopardizing our budget. And if we wait until the scheduled election, we lose another fiscal year, which will cost us almost $150,000 of our budget, which is well over 5% of our budget. We looked at the cost and the inconvenience versus the impact on our students and our children, and felt that it was worth requesting the earlier election to have it moved up so we can address this concern.
understood.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public discussion is now closed.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn the meeting.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Milan,
Yes.
Councilmember Moffett,
Yes.
Councilmember Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Woolley,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
We're nothing if not entertaining.